Without any desire for fruit, he attains to the state of actionlessness, i.e., he is released from the bondage of action. Such actions do not bear fruit, in the same way as a roasted or boiled seed loses its potency to sprout. Such actions lose their power of involving a man in the bondage of birth and death. A man can renounce desire when he perform actions only for the welfare of others, as actions have affinity for the world, while the affinity of self is for God. So long as he performs actions for himself, he cannot renounce desire, and as long as he does not renounce desire, he cannot attain to the state of actionlessness. In the first half of this verse, the Lord has declared that a karmagi does not attain the state of actionlessness by non-performance of actions. In the second half, he declares that a sphuric yogi, a follower of the discipline of knowledge, does not attain perfection, viz., a state of actionlessness by mere renunciation of action. It is necessary for a striver to renounce the sense of doership, in order to attain perfection. So a Sankhyogi, follower of the discipline of knowledge, instead of renouncing the performance of action, must renounce egoism. In Sankhyoga, actions can be performed and they can also be renounced to a certain extent, but in Karmaga, discipline of action, action is necessary as it is the means to attain success in yoga, viz., perfection. Gita 6/3. A vital fact: the Gita teaches a man how to attain spiritual perfection by performing one's duty. It inspires him to perform actions, rather than to renounce them. So the Lord lays emphasis on performing actions, in both the disciplines of action and knowledge. It is natural that when a striver aims at salvation, he gets tired of the worldly affairs and wants to renounce those affairs. Similarly, Arjuna, also being tired of actions, asks Lord Krishna why he is urging him to be engaged in this terrible action of waging war, when both the disciplines of action and knowledge lead to equanimity. But the Lord orders Arjuna to perform actions in both the disciplines. By the discipline of action, he orders him to perform action by being even-minded, Gita 2:48, while in the discipline of knowledge he orders him to fight, Gita 2:18. Therefore, the Lord urges people to perform actions rather than to renounce these. But the Lord asks them to renounce desire and attachment, which are like poison, in actions. A striver, instead of renouncing the performance of actions, should renounce his attachment to them. Yogis, men of action, having abandoned attachment, perform actions only by the body, mind, intellect, or merely by the senses, in order to render service to the world, without any selfish motive. Gita 5:11. In the discipline of knowledge, there is predominance of discrimination between the real and the unreal. Therefore, a Jnanagi assumes that it is modes which are acting on the modes, i.e., all the actions are performed by the body, senses, mind and intellect, etc., while he does nothing at all. Gita 3:28, 5/8-9. All strivers experience that as soon as a keen desire for salvation is aroused in them, they have disinclination for actions, things and persons, members of the family. But being attached to a body, they have a desire for rest, which is an obstacle to their progress. Generally, strivers believe that they can progress in the spiritual field by renouncing actions, things and company of people, but the fact is that renouncement of attachment to actions, things and people is an important factor. In the discipline of knowledge, it is difficult to renounce attachment without keen dispassion. But in the discipline of action, attachment is easily renounced by performing actions for others, even without keen dispassion. In the Gita, it is also mentioned that a striver may practice spiritual discipline in solitude. But in solitude, a sattvika, virtuous, person devotes his time in being busy with spiritual practice and adoration. A rajasa, passionate, person spends it in projections and distractions, while a tamasa, ignorant, man, wastes it in sleep, indolence and heedlessness. Therefore, a striver should have an inclination to dwell in solitude, in order to devote his time and energy to spiritual activities, but he should perform his mundane duty also, very promptly without being attached to it. He should be attached, neither to people nor to an action. Detachment leads a striver to salvation very quickly. In fact, external solitude is not the real solitude, because the body is also a fragment of the world. Therefore, real solitude consists in renouncing affinity with the body and the world, i.e., in renouncing egoism and attachment. Appendix: the divinity which is ours, is in us and is now, is not realized by doing something because that is never unattained. We shall do some action, then that reality will be realized. This conception strengthens identification of the self with the body. Every action has a beginning and an end, therefore by action only the thing will be gained which does not really exist. But because of affinity for Prakriti in every being, there is an inner urge for actions which does not enable him to be actionless. In order to pacify this urge, it is inevitable not to do what ought not to be done, and do without the sense of mine and with disinterest what ought to be done, viz., not to do any action for oneself but do only for the welfare of others. By doing actions for oneself, the impetus for actions will never end because the self is eternal while actions are transitory. Therefore by performing actions selflessly for the welfare of others, the urge for actions calms down, affinity for Prakriti gets renounced, and God, who pervades everywhere and every time, will be revealed and realized. For no one under any circumstances can remain even for a moment without undertaking action. Everyone is compelled to act, by the modes born of nature, Prakriti. 5. Comment in the disciplines of action, knowledge, and devotion. No striver can ever remain without performing actions. Hence the terms kasit, anyone, ksanam, a moment, and jatu, verily, are uncommon. Here, the term kasit denotes that no one, whether he is wise or ignorant, can remain without performing action. Though a wise man may have no relation with his so-called body, yet actions are constantly performed by it. The term ksanam denotes that a man does not assume that he performs actions constantly, but he cannot remain without performing action, even for a moment, so long as he assumes his affinity for the body. The term jata means that a man cannot remain without performing action, in any state such as wakefulness, sleep, sound sleep and unconsciousness. The Lord explains the reason by the term avasa, helplessly, in the second half of the verse, by declaring that he has to act helplessly by impulses born of nature. Nature is evr changeful. A striver has to do nothing for himself, he has to perform actions sanctioned by the scriptures, for the welfare of others. So far as forbidden actions are concerned, they cannot be performed by a striver, because his aim is God realization. Many people regard only those actions as actions, which are performed by the gross body. But according to the Gita, the activities undertaken by the body, speech or mind are also regarded as actions, Gita 18:15, and those actions, whether physical or mental to which a man is attached, lead him to bondage. Generally, people regard their professions, such as business, service or teaching and nursing of children etc., as actions, but they do not consider eating, drinking, sleeping, waking and thinking etc., as actions. So, when they renounce their profession, they think that they are not performing actions. But it is a serious error on their part. All the activities performed by the physical body, for the purpose of earning a living, actions performed by the subtle body like sleeping and thinking and in trance, performed by the causal body, are all regarded as actions. So long as a man has ego and sense of mindness with the body, the activities performed by body are actions, as the body is an evolute of nature and nature is never inactive. So, a person having egoism and attachment to the body, cannot remain without performing action, in either of the states, either of activity or inactivity. Everyone is made to act helplessly, by the modes of nature, Prakriti, because nature and its modes are ever active, Gita 3:27, 13:29. Though the soul is inactive, detached, imperishable, uniform and unconnected, yet so long as, it being attached to nature and its evolute the gross, subtle and causal bodies wants to derive pleasure and remains helpless under the control of nature, Gita 14:5. This helplessness of the self, under the control of nature, is due to affinity with nature. This has also been mentioned, in the 8th verse of the 9th chapter and the 19th verse of the 8th chapter. Individual nature is molded by tendencies and tendencies are born of modes and modes in their turn evolved from Prakriti. Therefore, to be subjected to nature or modes or Prakriti is one and the same thing. As a matter of fact, subjection to the Prakriti and its evolutes, is the root cause of all bondage. The same, on different occasions, has been defined as subjection to time, nature, action and Prakriti etc. So long as the self, soul, does not become free from nature and its modes, i.e., does not realize God, it remains helpless under the control of modes, time, nature, pleasures and even persons, property, etc. But when it transcends the modes of nature and realizes the self or God, it does not remain helpless, it attains freedom, which is axiomatic. Something noteworthy: there are two states of prakrti: active, gross, and inactive, subtle. Performance of action is the active state, while remaining idle and sleep, etc., is the inactive state. But, even in the inactive state, nature does not remain inactive, and activity goes on, in its subtle form. When a person is awakened by someone, he says that he was aroused, in half-sleep. This proves that the process of sleep continued even in the inactive state. In the same way, activity continues in a trance, dissolution, pralaya, and final dissolution, etc., in its subtle form. In fact, nature never remains inactive because it is ever-changing. In the self, spirit or soul, there is no doership, but having assumed its affinity for bodies, etc., the evolutes of nature, it becomes helpless, under the control of nature. It is because of helplessness that, though being a non-doer, assumes itself as doer. All the actions of the universe, such as seeing, hearing, breathing, digestion of food, etc., are performed by nature. So is the case with the states of childhood and youth. But the embodied soul is bound by regarding itself as the doer of some actions. Nature constantly undergoes changes, while in the pure self there is never any change. In fact, the worldly things have no existence of their own. The kaleidoscopic heap seems to exist in the form of things. When a man assumes his affinity for things, he cannot remain without performing actions, even for a moment in any state. If a striver realizes that all the activities are confined to the things and he has not the least relation with them, then only can he get rid of his helplessness. A karmagi, follower of the discipline of action, gets rid of this helplessness by renouncing the desire and attachment to the ever-changing things. Whatever has been said by the Lord here in this verse, has also been said in the 11th verse of the 18th chapter, when he declares, "It is indeed impossible for an embodied being to abstain from actions altogether." Appendix: all actions are performed only in prakriti, but a man, by accepting his identity with nature, prakriti, becomes dependent on the modes of nature, siyavasa, and he gets contaminated by actions. Therefore no person who assumes his affinity with nature, under any circumstances, can remain even for a moment without undertaking action in any state, as wakefulness, sleep, sound sleep, faint, trance, creation, new creation, dissolution and final dissolution, etc. How is an action performed in the states of sound sleep, faint and trance? When a man sleeps and any person awakes him in between, he says that he was awakened without having a full, complete sleep. It proves that at the time of sleep, the action from incompletion to completion was going on. Similarly, in faint and trance also an action goes on. In Patafijala Yoga Darsana this action has been called parinima. Parinima means current of variation, viz., flow of change. It means that from the beginning of trance to the state of relapse, an action goes on. If there is no action, there can't be relapse from the state of trance. At what is parinima? The change of the state from the original, existing, one to the other new one is parinima. Yoga Darsana Vibhuti 13, Vyasabhasya, the time of trance there is parinima, and at the end of trance there is relapse. Sahajavasta or Sahaja Samadhi, natural state of self-realization, transcends all states of prakriti. In it there is no action in the least, and action is not possible. Therefore in Sahajavasta there is neither parinima, current of change, nor vithana, relapse. The reason is that activities take place only in prakriti and its evolutes, never in the self. Karyate Hyavasa karma, we are helplessly driven to action, but we are quite free in having or not having attachment or aversion for them. Link in the 5th verse, it has been mentioned that no one can remain without action for a moment, even. One may object to these that a person could regard himself as free from action, by forcibly suspending the functions of the senses. The answer comes in the next verse. He who while restraining the organs of action, thinks of sense objects in his mind, he, of deluded understanding, is a hypocrite. 6. Comment here: the term karmendrayani does not stand only for the 5 organs of action, speech, hand, foot, anus and generative organ, but also stands for the 5 sensory organs, ear, skin, eye, taste and nose, because actions cannot be performed by the organs of action alone without sense organs. Besides this, if only the organs of action such as hand and foot etc., are restrained, but the sense organs such as ear and eye are not restrained. Hypocrisy is not fully proved. In the Gita, sense organs have also been included within the organs of action. Therefore, in the Gita only the term Khandriya rather than Jnanendriya has been used. In the 8th and 9th verses of the 5th chapter, the actions of the sense organs such as seeing, hearing and touching etc. have also been enumerated along with actions of the organs of action. It proves that in the Gita, the sense organs are also included in the organs of action. According to the Gita, the activities performed with the mind are also included in actions. Gita 18:15. It means that every evolute of nature is active, because nature is ever active. Though the term samyami means full control over senses, yet here it signifies only their outward restraint. The reason is that he who has completely controlled his senses cannot be called a hypocrite. A man of foolish understanding, who cannot distinguish the real from the unreal, restrains the senses forcibly from running after sense objects but thinks of the objects of enjoyment with his mind and assumes this state as actionless. Such a person is called a hypocrite. The reason is that outwardly he has restrained the organs and senses, but because of egoism, attachment and desire, he performs action by enjoying pleasure, while thinking of the objects of enjoyment. Worldly pleasures can be enjoyed externally, as well as internally. As external pleasures leave their influence, so do the internal ones, which are enjoyed by thinking of the objects of enjoyment, viz., by being attached to them. External pleasures can be renounced by applying discrimination, thinking of adverse consequences or to maintain social decorum. But there is no such obstacle in the enjoyment of internal pleasures. A person goes on enjoying these with his mind, and develops a false pride that he has renounced these pleasures. Thus, internal pleasures prove very fatal for him. Therefore, a striver should very carefully restrain his mind from thinking of the objects of enjoyment. Arjuna also wants to renounce the performance of actions, and asks Lord Krishna why he urges him to engage in the terrible deed. In response to his question, the Lord replies that a person who, having renounced the actions externally, has egoism, attachment and desire etc., but thinks that he is not performing any action, is a hypocrite. It means that striver, instead of renouncing the performance of actions, should perform them promptly, renouncing desire and attachment. Appendix: worldly pleasures can be enjoyed externally as well as internally by mind. Enjoyment of pleasures physically and relishing them by thinking of sense objects, there is no difference between the two. The same impression is made by dwelling on sense objects in the mind as it is made by physical enjoyment of pleasures. If one relishes the memory of pleasures, then several years may pass but that pleasure remains the same, fresh. Therefore the thought of pleasure gives birth to a new pleasure. Not only this, but relish of pleasures, by thinking of them, causes greater harm. The reason is that a man can renounce external pleasures in order to escape adverse public opinion and to maintain social decorum, but in the enjoyment of pleasures with the mind there is no such external obstacle. Therefore a man gets a good chance to enjoy them with the mind. So relishing pleasures with the mind is very harmful for a striver. In fact, renunciation of pleasures mentally is the real renunciation. Gita 2/64. Link: in the 4th verse, the Lord laid emphasis on the performance of actions, in both the disciplines of action and knowledge. In the 5th verse, he declared, no one can remain even for a moment without performing action. In the 6th verse, he said, he who, restraining the organs of actions forcibly regards himself as actionless, is a hypocrite. It means that renunciation of actions is not true renunciation. Therefore, he in the next verse explains the marks of real renunciation. But he who controls his senses through the mind, 0 Arjuna, and engages himself in the path of action, with the organs of action and sense, without being attached, is superior. 7 Comment: the term too, but, has been used in order to declare that such a follower of the discipline of action, free from attachment, is superior, not only to a hypocrite, but also to a follower of the discipline of knowledge. Arjuna: the term Arjuna means, pure in nature. The Lord, addressing him as Arjuna, says that being pure in nature, he should have no doubt about the performance of his duty. Yastvamdrayan Manasanamya. Here the term Manasa stands for all the inner senses, mind, intellect, faculty of reflection and ego. and the term Indrayani denotes all the 10 organs of action and sense organs. Controlling the senses by the mind means that by applying discrimination a striver should realize that the self has no affinity for the senses and the mind. When the senses are controlled by the mind, these can be engaged in or deviated from any activity as the striver wishes. Senses are controlled only when attachment to them is renounced totally. In the 11th verse of the 12th chapter also, there is mention of control over senses for a karmagi. It means that the striver can follow the path of action only by controlling the senses. In the preceding, 6th verse Lord Krishna talked about a hypocrite who forcibly restrains his senses, while here in this verse he is talking of preventing the senses from indulging in forbidden actions and engaging these in actions which are sanctioned by scriptures. When actions are performed according to the scriptural injunctions, senses are automatically controlled. Asakta, a man is attached to actions, and to their fruit. It is attachment, and not actions or their fruit, that is the root of all evils. Attachment is the main stumbling block to perfection. So a striver, instead of renouncing actions, should renounce attachment. He can be free from attachment when he, without regarding the body, senses, mind and intellect as his or for him, starts performing his duty promptly for the welfare of the world, by considering these of the world and for the world. By doing so, his attachment to the fruit of actions automatically perishes. All actions, including thinking and trance, have nothing to do with the self. Gita 5:11. Though the self is naturally unattached, yet by developing attachment, it gets attached to the world. The real merit of a karmagi consists in being free from attachment. Freedom from attachment means having no desire for the fruit of actions. A common man performs actions in order to fulfill his desire, while a striver performs actions having the aim of renouncing attachment. Such a striver is called here in asakta, unattached. A striver flowing the path of action can renounce the attachment and desire for fruit more easily than the striver who follows the path of knowledge. A karmagi, only through disinterested actions without any other means, can be free from attachment and desire for fruit, while a jnanagi, in order to do away with his sense of egoism and attachment, has to follow the path of action, i.e., he has to perform actions without having any desire for fruit. 5-6, 15-11. The reason is that unless dispassion is developed and body consciousness is removed, Sankhya is difficult to practice without having practiced karmaga beforehand. Through the practice of karmaga, Sankhya gets completely detached, and then through the practice of jnanaga, he attains perfection. As soon as a karmagi renounces attachment, he attains equanimity. Therefore, the Lord declares that actions need not be renounced but these should be performed without attachment. It is attachment which needs to be renounced. In karmaga, discipline of action, action is performed for the welfare of others, while yoga, union, is for one's own self. Arjuna considers action in relation to himself, therefore, he thinks that fighting is a terrible act. So the Lord clarifies that it is attachment to action, rather than action, by itself, which is terrible. Karmendraya karmaga marabate. As the term Indrayani stands for all the 10 senses, so does the term Karmendraya denote the 10 senses. If they are taken as the 5 organs of action alone, such as hand, foot and speech etc., how could actions be performed without seeing, hearing and thinking? Therefore, all the internal and external senses and organs, by which actions are performed, are included in Karmendraya. When an action is performed for the welfare of others without any selfish motive, it is called karmaga, or the discipline, path, of action. When a person performs actions for himself, he is attached to the actions and their fruit. But, when he performs these for others, actions and their fruit are related to others, while he is related to God, i.e., he realizes his real relation with God, the Eternal. Thus, performance of one's duty according to one's caste and circumstances etc., selflessly, is the beginning of karmaga, discipline of action. Strivers following the discipline of action are of 2 types. Those who are interested in performing actions, but their main aim is to attain salvation. Such strivers need not start new actions. They have to make proper use of the available circumstances. 2. Those who are more interested in rendering service to others, in providing comfort to others and in improving the society. than in their attainment of salvation. Such strivers can start performing new actions, with the aim of doing away with their attachment. In the Gita, Lord Krishna asks Arjuna to make a proper use of available circumstances, because Arjuna had a keen desire to attain the highest good, i.e., to attain bliss or salvation. Gita 217 and 3 Halves 5:1. He who performs actions for the welfare of others, having renounced his selfishness and fruit for action, is superior, as his all actions are directed towards the service of the world. All his possessions and body are also for the service of others. His selflessness is of such a degree that his ego, of the sense of rendering service, is completely annihilated. Thus he becomes totally detached and liberated. When a striver resolves to attain salvation, he wants to renounce actions, by regarding these as stumbling blocks to salvation. But the fact is, that it is not the action but it is the selfish motive in the performance of actions, which is an obstacle. Therefore, the Lord declares that a person, who without attachment performs action for the welfare of others, is superior to those hypocrites, who restrain the organs of action but have the sensi objects in mind. Even a person who performs action in order to receive its reward, such as heaven etc., is superior to a hypocrite. Then, there is no doubt that a karmagi who performs actions for the welfare of others without having any selfish motive, is superior. At the beginning of the 5th chapter, Arjuna asks Lord Krishna to tell him for certain which one of the two, sannyasa or yoga, renunciation of actions or their unselfish performance, is better. Lord Krishna replies that both lead to salvation, but unselfish performance of action is better than its renunciation. Similarly, here also he declares a karmagi, who performs actions for the welfare of others selflessly, to be superior. Appendix: in a striver, if there is eagerness for salvation, there is generosity in his nature and there is compassion in his heart, viz., he gets happy, pleased with the happiness of others and becomes sad, compassionate with the sufferings of others. A striver having possessed these three traits becomes eligible for karmaga. Being fit for karmaga, karmaga is easily practiced. In karmaga there is one division of karma, duty, and one division is of yoga, proper utilization of one's things, power, ability and rendering service to people. This is duty. By discharging one's duty there is disunion, disconnection from the assumed union with the world. This is yoga. Duty has its relation with the world and yoga has its relation with God. Link: in response to Arjuna's question, why the Lord was urging him to take such a dreadful action as warfare, he replied, no one can ever remain even for a moment without performing action. Then he explained that he who, restraining the organs of action, thinks of the sense objects, is a hypocrite, while he who engages himself in action without expecting any reward, is superior. Now in the next verse, he orders Arjuna to perform his allotted duty. Do perform thy prescribed duty, for action is superior to inaction. Besides, even the maintenance of the body would not be possible for thee, by inaction. 8. A man is permitted to perform two types of actions, those as laid down in the scriptures such as fasts and worship etc., and the allotted duty according to one's caste, order of life, nature and circumstance, such as eating food, doing business, construction of a house and guiding a person who has lost his way and so on. A man cannot perform all actions as laid down in the scriptures thoroughly, but he can very easily abandon the forbidden actions. Non-performance of prescribed actions is not very harmful. Abandonment of forbidden actions, such as falsehood, theft and violence etc., is very beneficial. When he abandons forbidden actions, actions sanctioned by the scriptures are automatically performed by him. In the discipline of action, action according to one's caste and sanctioned by the scriptures, is one's allotted duty, whether it is terrible or mild. Here Lord Krishna explains to Arjuna, that as a Kshatriya, member of the warrior class, it is his duty to fight. Gita 18:43. Though the action involves violence and bloodshed, yet it is his allotted duty. In the 2nd chapter also, the Lord told him that having regard for his own duty he should not falter. Gita 2:31. In fact svadharma, one's own duty, and nirta karma, allotted duty, both are one and the same. For Duryodhana being a member of the warrior class, it was his duty to fight, yet it was not his allotted duty, as being unjust he wanted to usurp the Pandavas' kingdom. For him, it was not a righteous and prescribed, Duty. Karma Jyo Hi Akarmana. The Lord, in this verse is answering the question put in the first verse, by using the same term Jaya, superior. There, Arjuna put the question why he was urging him to perform the terrible action of waging the war, when according to him knowledge was superior to action. In response to his question the Lord declared, a person following the path of action to be superior to person following the path of inaction. Thus, Arjuna wants to escape the battle, while the Lord exhorts him to fight, as it is his allotted duty. Therefore, the Lord in the 18th chapter declares, one should not abandon the duty suited to one's nature, even though it may be easy. 1848, because by abandoning it, one is exposed to sin and one continues to be attached to it. Therefore, performance of allotted duty is superior to renunciation of actions. Performance of actions without attachment is far superior to those performed with attachment, because by doing so, affinity for actions is totally renounced. Therefore, the Lord in the first half of this verse orders Arjuna to perform his allotted duty without attachment, while in the second half he declares that maintenance of the body would not be possible by inaction either. In the discipline of action the Lord's main principle is action is superior to inaction. The same fact has been pointed out by the Lord, when he declares, let not thy attachment be to inaction. Gita 2:47. The reason is, that he who shirks his duty wastes his time in heedlessness, laziness and sleep or performs forbidden actions, which mislead him to a downfall. It is better to be detached from actions by performing them, rather than through their non-performance. A person is in bondage, due to desire, attachment, partiality etc., whether he performs actions or not. In the path of action, if a striver has the aim to renounce desire, it can be renounced very easily, through the performance of action for the good of others. Arjuna had a misconception in his mind, that his affinity for actions would be automatically renounced, if he did not perform action. Therefore, Lord Krishna persuades him to perform actions by several pleas. One of these was, that even the maintenance of body would not be possible by inaction. As in the discipline of knowledge, affinity for the world is renounced by discrimination. In the discipline of action, affinity is renounced by performing one's duty sincerely and thoroughly. Therefore, the discipline of action should in no way be regarded as inferior to the discipline of knowledge. A karmagi, regarding the body as belonging to the world, uses it in rendering service to the world, i.e., he has no sense of mindness with it. He identifies the physical, subtle and causal bodies respectively, with the gross, subtle and causal world, while a jnanagi identifies himself with Brahma, the Absolute. Thus a karmagi identifies the insentient elements while a jnanagi identifies the sentient ones. A vital fact pertaining to spiritual middle discipline: generally strivers such as Arjuna commit an error, that they insist on non-performance of actions. Secondly, while practicing spiritual discipline they want favorable circumstances, so that they may attain their aim quickly. But such a desire is a stumbling block to their spiritual progress. A striver who wants to attain bliss easily and quickly is a pleasure seeker rather than a striver, because by doing so he has an eye, not on the spiritual discipline but on its fruit. The result is, that he gets tired of spiritual discipline and thus attains his aim late. A striver, who has a single-minded determination to attain bliss, is bent upon practicing the spiritual discipline, wholeheartedly without thinking of the difficulties, duration, pleasure and pain. Not to talk of a striver, even a greedy merchant bears all hardships, without caring for hunger and thirst etc., as long as customers continue to come and there is a good sale. Similarly, a striver practices spiritual discipline with relevance and devotion, without caring for comfort and even the bare necessities of life. He has a keen desire to attain his object. He bemoans if he finds himself unable to overcome any obstacle in the path of spiritual discipline, while a striver, who derives pleasure out of the spiritual discipline, gets angry when he finds an obstacle in his way. The curiosity or desire of a striver enhances every moment, while the latter thinks of relaxing, having attained the aim quickly. The former thinks that he has nothing to do, except practicing the spiritual discipline under all circumstances. So he applies his full power and attains bliss. But the latter, when he does not succeed quickly, may get disappointed. Therefore, a striver should attach more importance to the means, rather than to the end. like goddess Parvati, who in the Ramakaya Manasa declares, "I have a firm determination that I shall marry only Lord Shiva, otherwise I shall remain unmarried even though millions of births may pass. I shall not disobey the preaching of sage Narada, even if Lord Shiva may ask me to do so 100 times. 1/81/5. Mother Parvati is not time-conscious in her penance. In this verse, Lord Krishna through Arjuna urges all strivers to perform their allotted duties very promptly, by renouncing the desire for favorable circumstances and pleasures, which are the main stumbling blocks to spiritual progress. Appendix: a karmagi, who performs actions in a disinterested way, is not only superior to those who do not perform action or to those who do actions in an interested manner, but is also superior to a jnanagi. Gita 512. Therefore the Lord here is laying special emphasis on the performance of actions in a disinterested way. Link in the preceding verse, Lord Krishna declared that without performing action we cannot keep body and soul together. It proves that performance of action is essential. But actions lead to attachment and bondage. So how can a man be free from this bondage? The Lord answers the question in the next verse. The mankind is bound by actions other than those done for the sake of sacrifice. Therefore, 0 son of Kunal, Arjuna, perform action for that, yajna, sake, and without attachment. 9 comment according to the Gita, middle. Every duty is yajna, sacrifice. The term yajna includes sacrifice, charity, penance, oblation, pilgrimage, fast, study of the Vedas, and all physical, mundane and spiritual actions. Professions such as business, service and teaching etc., sanctioned by the scriptures, are also included in yajna. Other actions, which are performed in order to comfort others and for the welfare of others, are also included in the term yajna. Attachment perishes very quickly by performing actions for the sake of sacrifice, and all actions of a karmagi are dissolved. Gita 4:23. I.e., they, instead of leading the person to bondage, reduce the stock of his past actions also to nothing. In fact, a man's inclination is judged by his aim, rather than by his actions. As a businessman's aim while having a transaction is to earn money, and he thinks of money as soon as he shut his shop, similarly, a striver who performs action for the sake of sacrifice has the aim of God realization, and as soon as the action is over, he is inclined towards God. The people of different varnas, castes, have their allotted duties and actions. A brahmana, a member of the priest class, can depend on charity, which is a source of his living, while it is not allowed for a kshatriya, a member of the warrior class. Similarly, performance of actions without having any desire for fruit is a man's own duty, while performance of actions expecting their fruit is not his own duty. Similarly, forbidden actions are also not included in one's own duty, and so is the case with actions which are performed in order to gain pleasure, honor, praise and comfort etc. Therefore, a striver should take precaution lest the action should be performed with a selfish motive. In fact, a striver is he who is ever on the alert in this regard. If a person receives a visitor with open arms, in order to create a good impression of his gentleness upon him, it means that the action has been performed with a selfish motive. Therefore, such an action cannot be called a sacrifice. Similarly, if a person puts a question to an orator in a meeting or in a discourse in order to impress the orator and the audience, his action is not performed for the sake of sacrifice, yajvaya. It means that a striver should perform action by renouncing his selfish motive and desire. A striver should not take any action for pleasure and prosperity, or even for the maintenance of the body. If actions are performed for the maintenance of body, it means that there is a desire to live. Actions should be performed for the sake of sacrifice alone. Any action taken for personal welfare leads to bondage. Indeed, the supreme striver is he who performs actions for the welfare of others, even without having a desire to attain salvation. The welfare of others also involves one's own welfare. Therefore, all the mundane and spiritual actions should be performed for the welfare of others. Action which is performed for one's own self leads to bondage. Therefore, even actions such as remembrance, reflection, meditation and even a trance should be practiced for the welfare of the world. Thus whatever a striver does with his physical, subtle and causal bodies, does only for others, not for himself. By doing so, his affinity for the world is renounced, and he is when a man performs actions for himself, It means that he has a desire for the fruit of actions, and where there is desire for the fruit of actions, there is the possibility of the performance of forbidden actions. United with God. This is known as karmaga. Only human beings are entitled to take action in the form of performing a duty, sacrifice, as has been described by the Lord relating to the topic of the wheel of creation. 3:14-16. He who performs actions with an interested motive is bound, while he who performs actions for the welfare of others performs his duty and attains liberation from bondage. It is not action but attachment and selfishness which bind him. Here the term muktasanga, freedom from attachment, denotes that actions should be performed without entertaining the feeling of mine and attachment to actions, things, body, mind and intellect, etc. If the feeling of mine and attachment are renounced, actions are automatically performed for the welfare of others, and if a striver has no other actions to perform, he automatically gets established in the self. Consequently, only actions which are prescribed by the scriptures are performed by him. The renunciation of duty out of indolence and carelessness is declared to be tamash, Gita 18:17, which results in delusion, i.e., such a person is born in the wombs of the deluded. He who abandons a duty because it is painful, such relinquishment is rajas, Gita 18:8. The fruit is pain, Gita 14:16. Therefore, here Lord Krishna does not exhort Arjuna to renounce actions, but he orders him to perform actions efficiently and enthusiastically, renouncing selfishness, mineness, attachment, desire for fruit and partiality, etc., according to the ordinance of the scriptures. Such relinquishment is regarded satvaka, Gita 18:9. The Lord himself further declares that there is nothing in the three worlds that must be done by him, yet he is engaged in action. 3:22-23. A person becomes slack in performing actions because of two factors. 1. It is in the nature of human beings that they perform action with a view to reaping the fruit. But when, according to the discipline of action, he realizes that actions are to be performed without the desire for fruit, he thinks why he should perform actions at all. 2:1f Having started action, he realizes that it will bear adverse fruit. He feels that he should not perform it. A karmagi has neither any desire nor expectation of the perishable fruit of action. He performs actions only in order to do good to the world. So there cannot be any slackness in the performance of duty. A vital fact: generally, a person does an act promptly and efficiently, only if it serves his selfish motive, but such an action binds him. In order to be free from the bondage, he should perform actions prescribed by the scriptures, disinterestedly. In the discipline of action, all actions are performed for others. Who are others? Not only other beings and things, but the so-called our own bodies, gross, subtle, senses, mind, intellect and life breath, and causal, including ego, are also included in the term others. The reason is that the self, soul, is a fragment of sentient God, while these bodies and things are the fragments of insentient prakriti, matter. All actions are performed through the evolutes of nature such as body, etc., and for the body and the world, which are also evolutes of nature, while the sentient neither undergoes actions, nor are actions performed for the sentient. So actions can never be performed for the self. But like the world, the body, senses, mind and intellect are also different from us. Therefore, a karmagi, without assuming them as his own, serves them. He does not let the body become sleepy, indolent, heedless, idle and pleasure-seeking. Thus he renders service to the body. He renders service to the senses by not allowing them to be engaged in worldly pleasures. He renders service to the mind by not allowing it to think of doing harm to others or thinking of sense objects or futile things. He serves the intellect by not allowing it to think of the duties of others. He serves ally of them by having neither the feeling of mindness nor attachment. When the self assumes worldly and sentient things, such as a body, etc., as I, mine and for me, he performs actions for himself. By performing actions for others, attachment and the feeling of mine perish easily. Everybody can realize that the states of the body, childhood, youth, etc., undergo change, but he remains the same. This unchanging self, soul, has its identity with God, while the changing body, senses, mind and intellect, etc., have their identity with the world. Whatever action is performed by us, is performed with body and senses, etc., not by the self. This shows that we have nothing to do for ourselves, we have to do only for the world. When we perform actions for ourselves, we are bound by those actions. The man is bound by actions other than those performed for the sake of sacrifice. Yajna, the imperishable and unchanging self, has no affinity for the perishable and changing body, senses, mind and intellect etc. Therefore, there is nothing one's own and for one's own self. We can do nothing without the help of the body etc. Therefore we have to do nothing for the self. The self can never lack anything. Without want there can arise no desire. Therefore, it needs nothing for itself. In this way, when a man's affinity for actions and things is severed, if he is inclined towards knowledge, he realizes the self. On the other hand, if he is inclined towards devotion, he attains to the state of exclusive devotion. Appendix: a man is not bound by performing actions, but he is bound by anatrakarma, viz., actions which are done with a selfish motive, for himself. Gita 3:13. Therefore the expression means nothing is to be done for one's own self. A man can be free from the bondage of actions only when he renders service to the world with the body, things, ability and strength, power, which he has received from the world and covets no fruit. The reason is that the world can't provide us the thing which we aim at. We want bliss, want immortality, want carefreedom, want fearlessness, want independence, self-dependence. But all this will not be available to us from the world, but it will be available by snapping off our ties with the world. In order to get dissociated with the world, it is necessary that whatever we have received from the world, we surrender it to the world in its selfless service. Linked I, the Lord in the preceding verse declared, the man is bound by actions other than those performed for the sake of sacrifice. Therefore, in order to be free from bondage, actions instead of being renounced, should be performed, only in the spirit of performing a duty. Yajna. The Lord confirms the same fact, by giving other reasons in the next 3 verses. At the beginning, when the Creator Prajapati created living beings with sacrifice, Vina, and said, by this shall you propagate, let this fulfill all your requirements for the sacrifice. Yajna. By this gratify the gods and let the gods foster you, these caring for each other selflessly through your duties, you shall attain to the supreme good. 10:11. Comment 1. Who creates beings or things etc., it becomes his duty to preserve them. Brahma is the creator and lord of creation, and so he always thinks of the preservation and salvation of creation. Thus, he is known as Prajapati, lord of creation. At the beginning of creation, Brahms, the creator, created man by providing him with power for performing actions and also bestowed upon him discrimination. The right use of desirable and undesirable circumstances leads to salvation. Therefore, the Creator bestowed upon mankind discrimination, in order to enable them to make the right use of the favorable and unfavorable circumstances. Beasts, birds and trees etc., even without having the power of discrimination, naturally do good to others, but by God's grace, special power of discrimination has been bestowed upon mankind. So if a man does not perform forbidden actions, by attaching importance to his discrimination, naturally actions for the welfare of others are performed by him. Though the term praja, creation, stands for gods, sages, manis, mankind and other beings, beasts, birds and trees etc., yet mankind is particularly responsible to rear all beings. Therefore, here the term praja stands for mankind. The discipline of action, karmaga, has been functioning from time immemorial. In the 3rd verse of the 4th chapter, also the Lord by the term Puratana declares that the same ancient yoga has been taught to Arjuna by him, which was lost to the world by a long lapse of time. The same fact has been pointed out here in this verse, in a different way by the term Pura, at the beginning, by declaring, not only I, but also Brahma, at the beginning of creation, having created men ordered them to follow the discipline of action. It means that, this discipline of action has been going on from time immemorial. It is nothing new. Brahma, the Creator, creates mankind under the instruction of God and with his power. So in fact God is the real creator of creation. Gita 4:13 17123. In the 4th chapter, from the 24th to the 30th verses, all the sacrifices for God realization through wealth, austerities, yoga, spiritual exercise, vital force etc., have been described. Generally the term yajna is taken as oblation, or sacrifice. But in the Gita, the term stands for all the prescribed actions as laid down in the scriptures. All the duties performed according to one's caste, order of life, religion, nature, time and circumstances etc., are included in the term yajna. Actions performed for the welfare of others are also included in yajna, sacrifice. It is a man's responsibility to perform such a sacrifice, duty. Brahma, the Creator, says to mankind, by the performance of duty shall you propagate, and by doing so you shall get all the requisites necessary for performing your duty. Arjuna was not willing to perform his duty. Therefore, Lord Krishna says to him that he should learn the lesson of performing his duty from the Creator's words. By performing his duty for the welfare of others, he would progress here, as well as hereafter. Performance of actions in a disinterested way leads to salvation, while performance with a selfish motive leads to bondage. Here is explained the topic of performance of duty, without having any desire for fruit. Therefore, the term istakama does not stand for the desired material, it stands for the required material for sacrifice, duty. In the preceding verse Lord Krishna declared, the world is bound by actions other than those performed for the sake of sacrifice, i.e., by actions performed with the desire for fruit. Further in the 13th verse he declares, those sinful ones who cook food for their own sake, i.e., perform actions for fruit, verily ate sin. Thus in the preceding as well as the next verse there is mention of renunciation of the desire for fruit. So in the middle verses, 10th, 11th and 12th, also it should be interpreted as the renunciation of the desire for fruit. If the meaning of the term istakama is taken as the desire for fruit, it does not fit this context, as such actions lead to bondage. So the term stands for the required material for sacrifice, performance of duty. A Kanagi, the follower of the discipline of action, is ever ready to render service or do good to others. Therefore, according to the ordinance of Brahma, the Creator, such a karmagi does not lack the required capacity and material for rendering service to others, and for the maintenance of his body. All this required material is easily available to him. According to the ordinance of Brahma, everybody has been offered this material, in order to enable him to perform his duty. In fact, this human body has not been bestowed upon human beings to enjoy pleasures. Manasa 7/44/1. Therefore, there is no mention in any one of the scriptures that man should enjoy worldly pleasures. Society also does not permit a person to enjoy pleasures freely. On the other hand, the scriptures, as well as society, urge a man to bring comfort to others and to do good to them. It is mentioned in the scriptures that a father should foster his son, but it is not mentioned that he is authorized to expect service from his son. Similar is the case with others, such as a son and a wife etc. A karmagi always wants to give but not to receive, because the desire for fruit, besides being a stumbling block to salvation, is an obstacle to receiving worldly things. This is everybody's experience, that no one wants to offer anything to a person who hankers after it. Therefore, Brahma says, that a man can attain the supreme good, salvation, by performing his duty in a disinterested manner, without having any desire for reward. In the expression Devambhavayanina, the term Deva denotes all beings, such as men, gods, sages and manis etc., because the aim of the striver, following the path of action, is to nurture every being. So Brahma, the Creator, orders men to offer sacrifice, in the form of the performance of duty, in order to foster and nurture other people for their advancement. Each man devoted to his own duty, attains perfection, viz., salvation. Gita 18:45. Men are free in the performance of their duty, so they should make proper use of this freedom. Trees and plants etc. naturally bear flowers and fruits, but their growth is luxuriant if these are tended properly. Similarly, a man should perform his duty by nurturing and fostering the gods by offering worship and service to them. By doing so, he is sustained by the gods with timely rain etc. But when he does not perform his duty properly, the gods do not properly protect, and so he has to face calamities, such as a deluge and drought etc. This expression should not be interpreted to mean that we should serve others only, if they serve us. It should mean that we should perform our duty by serving others, without bothering about of what others do. He, who cares for the duties of other people, deviates from his own duty, and has a downfall. Moreover, it is beyond our power to force anyone, to perform his duty. We have to perform our duty of fostering others and doing good to them, to the best of our resources, such as intellect, power, time and material etc. In that way, our affinity for the insentient matter will be totally renounced. We have to serve all our relatives, such as parents, wife, sons, brothers, wives etc., in a disinterested way by regarding service as our obligatory duty to them according to the scriptural injunctions. We are born to repay our debt by serving, because we are indebted to them. It is an error on our part if we expect any reward from them or lay claim to them. We have to serve all beings, but the first preference should be given to those kith and kin who have a claim on our service. It is an accepted fact that the body, senses, mind, intellect and possessions are neither ours nor for us. If we sincerely perform our respective duties, we will add immensely to the welfare of the world. A vital fact pertaining to duty and right in the discipline of action is striver by performing his duty, safeguards the rights of others. It is the duty of a son to serve his parents, and the parents have a right to such service. What is the right of others, is our duty. Therefore, every person should perform his duty, in order to safeguard the rights of others, without paying heed to whether they perform their duty or not. A man deviates from his duty by thinking of the duty of others and then has a downfall. Nowadays, in families and society at large, disquietude, conflict, friction and disorder etc. are rampant. The root cause is that people demand their rights but they do not perform their duty. Therefore, Brahma, the Creator, preaches to the gods and men that it is their duty to do good to each other. Sri /T Paramavapsyatha. Generally people hold that the statement, that the gods and men by fostering each other, shall attain the supreme good, is an exaggeration. But in fact, it is not so. If anyone is doubtful about it, he himself can translate this principle into practice and see the same result. When the trust money is returned to the owner by a person, he has not the least affinity for that money. Similarly, when we utilize worldly things in rendering service to the world, our affinity for the world and worldly things is renounced. As soon as this affinity is renounced, supreme good is attained. Therefore, it is an error to take Brahm's word as an exaggeration. So long as a person performs actions for himself, he is bound by them, and his actions do not come to an end. But when he does nothing for himself, nothing remains to be done by him and he does not commit sin, because desire is the root of sins. Gita 3:37. Therefore, a striver, in order to attain supreme good, salvation, should perform his duty by renouncing attachment and the desire for fruit, according to the ordinance of the scriptures. By doing so, attainment of salvation is axiomatic. Renunciation of one's desire leads to the welfare of the entire world. He who enjoys pleasures, being attached to them in order to satisfy his desire, performs an act of violence, downfall, for himself as well as for those who lack those materials because they are sad due to the shortage of those materials. Thus a pleasure-seeking person cannot escape sins. On the other hand, one gets peace from those people who follow the spiritual path, as everyone can lay equal claim to spiritual assets. Thus, according to Brahma, the Creator, if a man performs his duty renouncing desire and attachment, he can attain the supreme good, viz., salvation, without any doubt. Here, attainment of the supreme good has been specially mentioned for human beings, rather than gods. The aim of the gods is not to attain salvation, but they offer rewards to men, according to their actions, provide required matter to them for performing actions and enjoy the rewards for their good actions performed in the past. They do not provide the required matter disinterestedly. But, when even the vilest sinner can attain salvation, the gods can also attain salvation if they have a desire to do so. However, generally, their aim is to enjoy the heavenly pleasures, so they have no desire to attain salvation. Appendix: man alone is qualified for performing new actions, while 84 lakh forms of lives, life of gods and life of beings residing in hells, are the lives to reap the fruit of their past actions. Men with interested motives go to heaven in order to enjoy heavenly pleasures. Therefore the gods follow their responsibility and discharge their duty not disinterestedly. Therefore eligibility for salvation is only for men. Salvation is innate while bondage is caused one. Human life is only to attain salvation. Therefore the person who discharges his duty, naturally attain salvation. For salvation no new work needs to be done, but whatever work a man does, if he does it for the welfare of others, by renouncing selfishness, egoism and the verse 10:11 289 desire for fruit, it will lead him to salvation. Without disinterested motive, if a man performs his duty, he goes to higher regions such as heaven etc. The heaven which is attained by performing grand religious sacrifice, can be attained by etc. just by discharging his duty of fighting in a war. As Brahmaji has told the gods and meant to do good to each other in selfless spirit through their duties, similarly it should be interpreted that the people of the four varnas, castes, should do good to each other. If the people of the four varnas, social orders, discharge their duty for the welfare of each other, it will lead them to salvation. The entire universe has been created in the manner that there is nothing, object or action, for one's own self, but everything is only for others. Itam Brahmana Mama. For example, a chaste wife is only for her husband, not for herself. A woman's organs appeal to a man, not to a woman. Similarly, a man's organs appeal to a woman, not to a man. A mother's milk is only for the child, not for her own self, and the child's activities are to please the mother, rather than to itself. Parents are for the good of their offspring and the offspring are for the good of their parents. The audience is meant for the speaker and the speaker is meant for the audience. It means that one should not derive pleasure, comfort, himself, but should provide it to others. The universe has not been created to enjoy pleasures but to attain salvation. The gods also, by renouncing their selfishness, can do good to others. Therefore among gods also there have been sages such as Narada etc. Though the Lord's ordinance does not deprive anyone of God realization, salvation, but a man is predominantly and naturally eligible, qualified, for it. Here a question may arise that we do good to others but others instead of doing good to us, do evil to us. Then how will Parasparan Bhavayanta be applicable? The answer is that if we do good to others, others will not be able to do evil to us. They will have no power to do evil to us. Even if they do evil to us, they will repent for it afterwards and will lament for it. If they do evil to us, there will be many others to do good to us and to sympathize with us. In fact, there is no ordinance anywhere to do evil to anyone. A man because of aversion does evil to others. Paraspara Bhavayanta, service to each other selflessly through one's duty. This applies to mankind. Without following it, people are suffering pain. Fostered by the sacrifice, yajna, the gods will bestow upon you all the requisite necessary for performing your duty. He who relishes these, without using these in the service of others, is verily a thief. 12. Comment here: the term istabhaga does not stand for the desired objects because in the preceding, 11th, verse there is mention of attaining the highest good and this verse in related to that verse. Secondly, as long as a man has desire, he can't attain the highest good. So here this term means that the gods will supply him all the required material for the performance of sacrifice, duty. Here the expression yajnabhavideva means that the gods provide the required material to men by regarding it as their right, responsibility. Men are indebted to them, so they have to perform sacrifice, duty. Brahma used the expression te deva for the gods, because before him, they were men, not gods. But here the term ebhya stands for nearness. For God, everyone is near him, Gita 7:26. It proves that the holy words from divine lips begin here. Here, the term bhunkt does not stand only for eating, but for enjoyment of all the objects, food, clothes, house and money etc., required for the maintenance of a body. We owe this body to our parents, and it is they who have fostered it. For our knowledge, we are grateful to our preceptors and sages. The gods have provided us with the material necessary for the performance of duty. The manis guide us, how to provide ourselves with comforts. Beasts, birds, trees and creeping vines etc., sacrifice themselves, in order to provide comfort to others and do good to them, though they are not aware of it. Thus, whatever material, strength, ability, rank, authority, wealth and property we possess, we owe it all to others. So whatever we possess should be devoted to the service of others. The body, senses, mind and intellect etc. are not ours. These came from the world. So, if we want to enjoy worldly pleasures by regarding these as our own, they lead us to bondage. But if we perform our duty by utilizing these in rendering service to the other people, from whom we have received them, without expecting any reward, we can get rid of the bondage. Generally, strivers think that if they render service to the worldly people, they would be attached to them and would get entangled in the world. But the Lord's gospel proves that it is not service but desire, which leads to bondage. So, it is every man's duty, like the gods, to serve others and do good to them, according to his resources. The Lord and gods do not expect more from him. Stina Eva saw here, in the expression sa Stina, he is a thief. The purpose of using the singular number is to emphasize the fact that he, who without performing his duty, of giving the required objects, food, water, clothes etc., to others, enjoys them all alone, is a thief. The person who without repaying the rightful due of others and enjoys the objects himself, is a thief. Thus a thief is he who performs actions with a selfish motive in order to gain honor and prestige. Such a person can never gain purity and peace of mind. This body is neither different nor can be different from the world, because it is a fragment of the world. Therefore, if a person assumes the body as his, without accepting the world as his, this assumption gives birth to pairs of opposites such as attachment and aversion, and also evil propensities such as pride, individuality and unevenness of mind etc. A striver following the path of action gets rid of the pairs of opposites such as attachment and aversion etc. easily, because whatever such a striver does, he does for the welfare of the world. He even practices the spiritual discipline, not for his own salvation, but for the salvation of the entire world. The reason is, that if he regards his salvation different from the salvation of others, it means that he has unevenness of mind, which is a stumbling block to his spiritual progress. He, who uses the body, senses, mind and intellect etc., which he has received from the world, for his selfish motive, is dishonest. An important fact pertaining to duty according to Indian culture: a man's only aim is to attain salvation. Therefore, Brahma, the creator, at the beginning of creation, urged men to perform their duty while fostering one another, without any selfish motive. Gita 3/10. Members of a family commit an error, that they perform actions under the influence of desire, mindness, attachment and selfishness etc. So they have to suffer here, as well as hereafter. They fall a prey to quarrel, fight, envy and jealousy etc., while hereafter, they have to reap the adverse fruit of the actions performed by them. When a person serves others in the hope of reward, he is attached to persons and things. This attachment leads him to bondage. A selfish man is not liked or praised by anyone. In a family, objects get concealed from a passionate and pleasure-seeking person. On the other hand, if a person serves others with all his resources, he attains salvation and is also praised, honored, comforted and supplied things, even though he is unwilling to receive them. A karmagi has no desire to win honor or praise etc., because desires and pleasures bind him. Desire for pleasure diverts a man from the performance of duty, and is conducive to his downfall. So a striver, following the path of action, should always think of doing good to others including the members of his family, without having any pride of doership. As a mother's milk is meant only for a child, similarly, whatever material a man possesses, is only for others. Therefore, a man should not regard his possessions as his own and for him. The possessions will perish, but bondage in the form of attachment and feeling of mindness will prevail. So the Lord declares, that he who enjoys the objects, regarding these as his own, is a thief. A man is indebted to the gods, sages, manis, birds, beasts, trees and creeping plants etc., because it is in their nature to serve him and do good to him. Therefore, 5 kinds of sacrifice, for sages, for gods, for creatures, for manis and for men, have been prescribed in the scriptures. By this 5-fold sacrifice, duty, he can satisfy all of them. Therefore, having shouldered this responsibility by making use of his freedom, he can attain to the supreme good. The gods etc. do their duty. If men do not perform their duty, there is a commotion not only among the gods but in the entire universe. Consequently, there are natural calamities such as a deluge, drought, earthquake and famine etc. The Lord in the Gita 3:23-24 declares, "If ever I did not engage myself in action, unwearied, men in every way would follow my path and I should be the creator to disordered life as well as of destruction of beings." Gita 3:23-24. As a whole bullock cart faces a series of jerks, when even a small portion of a wheel is damaged. Similarly, even if a single person deviates from his duty, he leaves an adverse effect on the entire universe. On the contrary, as the recovery of a diseased limb makes the whole body healthy, similarly the person who performs his duty sincerely and efficiently, does good to the entire universe. Brahma, the creator, ordered both gods and men to perform their duty. The gods follow a certain code of conduct, but men ignore it due to their folly. They start laying a claim to the matter, which has been bestowed upon them for the welfare of others. Moreover, they have been endowed with freedom, so that by making proper use of it, they may be free from the bondage of actions, in which they have been placed in, since infinity. But, by misusing that freedom they get attached to actions and their fruit. Consequently, they get entangled and head for suffering in numberless future births. Therefore, men should serve all beings such as God, gods, sages, manis and men etc., with all the resources and possessions which have been bestowed upon them. Question: how will a karmagi keep his body and soul together, if everything is to be utilized in the service of others? Answer: in fact this question arises only when a man assumes the identity of the self with the body. A karmagi does not accept his affinity for the body. He regards the body as the world's and, therefore, serve the world with it. He has his eyes on the imperishable self, rather than on the perishable body. Only the person who is mindful of his body can ask such a question. As long as a person is eager to enjoy worldly pleasures, he is keen to remain alive and fears death. A karmagi has no desire for pleasures. All his actions are performed in order to render service to others, so he does not care, even to live alive. The question how he will maintain his body does not arise in his mind. In fact, he who performs his duty disinterestedly for the welfare of the world is an asset to the world which provides for his living. In the domain of God, when there is provision for the maintenance of the bodies of ordinary creatures, such as beasts, birds, insects, germs, trees and plants etc., whose lives are for the good of others, how is it possible that there will be no provision for the maintenance of the body of the striver who serves all beings, with all his resources including his body? The Preserver Lord by his grace has equally bestowed upon beings the material required for the maintenance of their bodies. A mother is a living example to prove this fact. The mother's breasts, where there is blood in abundance, are filled with sweet and nourishing milk as soon as a baby is born. Whether it is through the grace of God or through fate, a man gets the things necessary for his living, so there is no need to worry about it. In the domain of God, when there is a provision for the maintenance of the body of even the vilest sinner or a confirmed atheist, will there not be any provision for maintaining the body of a karmagi? Therefore, it is futile to raise such a question. Appendix: the term yajna means fostered, worshipped, enriched by sacrifice. Being in the middle world, a man can foster all living beings who are living in the upper as well as the lower region. The man has been settled in the middle region so that he may do good to all. Therefore the man is qualified, eligible, for attaining salvation. Link in the 9th verse. The Lord, having declared that mankind is not bound by actions, which are performed for the sake of sacrifice, ordered Arjuna to perform action for that sake. The same order of the Lord was confirmed by Brahma's word. Now in the next verse, he explains what the fruit of the performance and non-performance of sacrifice, duty, is. The righteous who eat the remnants of the sacrifice are released from all sins, but those sinful ones who cook food for themselves verily devour sin. 13. Comment: Yajnasista santa, when duties are performed according to the scriptural injunctions, without any hope of reward, equanimity, in the form of a remnant of the sacrifice, is achieved. The main factor in the discipline of action is, that an action is performed only with the material which is received from the world. Therefore an action is called yajna only if by its selfless service is rendered to the world. After performing sacrifice, action, the residue yoga, equanimity, is, for oneself. This yoga, equanimity, is the essence which has been called nectar in the 4th chapter, 431. Musi and sarva kilbas. Here the term kilbas means sins, viz., bondage. The Lord has used the adjective, sarva, all, which means that having realized equanimity, a man is released from all bondage. All his actions performed in the past, as stored and ripe ones, as well as those performed ones at present, melt away, i.e., are reduced to nothing. Gita 4:23. When his actions have been reduced to nothing, he attains to the eternal absolute. Gita 4:31. When he has no desire, his stored actions of the past disappear. So long as the body is alive, desirable and undesirable circumstances appear according to the fortune, but he remains unaffected by them. Thus actions in the form of fortune also disappear. As far as the actions of the present are concerned, they are turned into inaction, i.e., they don't bear any fruit because they are performed without any desire for fruit. In the 9th verse of this chapter, the Lord declared, mankind is bound by actions, other than those performed for the sake of sacrifice. While in the 23rd verse of the 4th chapter he declared, all the actions of the man who works for the sake of sacrifice are dissolved. The same fact has been pointed out here, in this verse. It means that people who realize equanimity, the remnant of sacrifice, are liberated from all bondage. Not only the sinful actions, but also the virtuous actions which are performed, with the hope of fruit, are conducive to bondage. He who has attained equanimity as remnant of sacrifice, casts away both good, virtues, and evil, sins. Gita 2:50. Now think over the root of bondage. The desire, that this should happen and that should not happen, is the root of bondage. Desire is the cause of all sins. Gita 3:37. So it must be renounced. In fact, desire has no independent existence of its own. It is born of a feeling of want in the self, while in the self, soul, no paucity is ever possible. So the self has no desire. But a man's self, by identifying itself with the unreal body etc., feels the missing objects for the body as shortage in him, and thus has a desire for the unreal. He should realize that he, self, ever remains the same, while the worldly objects and actions appear and disappear. These are born and perish. So, how can the perishable fulfill the desire of the imperishable? Therefore, it is a folly to hanker after those sense objects. They cannot make up the deficiency. If a serious and proper thought is given to this point, desires can be wiped out easily. When a striver renders service with his body and things etc., without regarding these as his and for him, his affinity with the body and things etc., is renounced and he realizes the real self. Then, he feels no want. Such a man is liberated from the bondage of the world, while he is alive. All kind of desire, selfishness, attachment etc., are included in the expression atmakaranat, for their own sake. The more selfish a man is, the greater a sinner he is. Here the term paikanti denotes all the mundane actions such as eating, drinking, walking, sitting and so on. Whatever action a selfish man performs, either for himself or for others, performs only for himself. On the other hand, a striver who, having renounced selfish motives while performing his duty, works for others only, even when he appears to work for himself. He, who uses the objects which he has received from the world for his own enjoyment, actually cooks food for his own sake. It is a great sin to regard the body, a fragment of the world, as one's own and for one's own self. But he who without regarding the body as his own, supplies necessities such as food, water and clothes etc., to it, and does not allow it to be lazy, heedless and pleasure-seeking, renders service to it and becomes free from the feeling of mindness and attachment to it. Man himself has to reap the fruit of actions performed by him. But his actions affect the entire world. He who performs actions for himself deviates from his duty. That deviation results in calamities such as famines, epidemics and deaths etc., in a country. So, it is proper on the part of a man, that he should do nothing for himself, should regard nothing as his own and should desire nothing for himself. He who expects the perishable fruit of actions, is also like those who cook food, for their own sake. So the Lord in the first verse of the 6th chapter, declares that a karmagi should perform his allotted duty without depending on the fruit of actions. When a man totally renounces dependence on the fruit of action, he does nothing for himself and thus gets established in yoga. The Lord condemns the sinful ones, who perform actions for themselves. Such persons store so many sins which are not exhausted even after suffering tortures in hells and 84 lakh forms of lives, but their sinful actions remain as stored actions. Say ascetic karma. Human life is such a marvelous field in which, as we sow so shall we reap for many births to come. Therefore, a man must resolve not to commit sins in future, i.e., must not perform actions for himself. Such a resolution means a great power. The fact is, that all the sins of a man who resolves to follow the spiritual path cease to be committed by him. Appendix: the body, ability, rank, position, authority, knowledge and power etc., which a man possesses, have been obtained and will be lost. Therefore they are not ours and are not for us, but they are for rendering service to others. Our Indian culture is summed up in this principle. As all the organs of the body are for the welfare of the body, so all the people of the world are for the welfare of the world. A man may be of any country, guise, varna, social order, asrama, stage of life, etc., may easily attain salvation by rendering service to others through his actions. Whatever characteristic we have, is for others, not for us. If all the people follow this idea, no one will remain bound but all will become liberated souls. If you use the things which you have received from the world as the service of others, what have you spent of your own? It leads you to salvation free of cost. Besides this, nothing needs to be done for salvation. We are responsible to spend only whatever we possess. We have no responsibility to spend more than that. A man can't do more than that. If we spend the things, ability and strength etc., completely in rendering service, we shall attain complete salvation. In fact, the body is useful only for the world, not for one's own self, because the body is not for us at all. The body is in fact this human birth is the first as well as the last birth of all births. If a man realizes God, it is the last birth. But if he does not attain God realization, it is the first one of the infinite births, needed in order to do some action. If nothing is to be done, then what is the need of the body? Therefore to do any action for one's own self with this body, is a flaw. We can't do anything for the self with the thing which we have received, but with that we can serve the world. The body is a fragment of the world, therefore whatever will be done with it, will be only for the world. The body, senses, mind, intellect can't go beyond the world. They can't be separated from the world. Therefore performance of actions for one's own self is not human nature, but it is demoniac and devilish nature. In fact, man is only a human being in the real sense, who does actions for the welfare of others. He who performs actions for one's own pleasure, verily devours sin, viz., ever remain sad, while those who work for the welfare of others, are released from all sins, viz., become happy forever. Gita 4:31. Link: Arjuna puts the question to Lord Krishna, why do you urge me to perform this savage deed? In response to his question, the Lord, having given several reasons, propounds the necessity of performing sacrifice, duty, in order to maintain the world order, in the next two verses. From food, creatures come into being. From rain, food is produced. From sacrifice, yajna, comes rain and sacrifice is born. In hells and 84 lakh forms of lives, but their sinful actions remain as stored actions, say ascetic karma. Human life is such a marvelous field in which, as we sow so shall we reap for many births to come. Therefore, a man must resolve not to commit sins in future, i.e., must not perform actions for himself. Such a resolution means a great power. The fact is, that all the sins of a man who resolves to follow the spiritual path, cease to be committed by him. Appendix: the body, ability, rank, position, authority, knowledge and power etc., which a man possesses, have been obtained and will be lost. Therefore they are not ours and are not for us, but they are for rendering service to others. Our Indian culture is summed up in this principle. As all the organs of the body are for the welfare of the body, so all the people of the world are for the welfare of the world. A man may be of any country, guise, varna, social order, asrama, stage of life, etc., may easily attain salvation by rendering service to others through his actions. Whatever characteristic we have, is for others, not for us. If all the people follow this idea, no one will remain bound but all will become liberated souls. If you use the things which you have received from the world as the service of others, what have you spent of your own? It leads you to salvation free of cost. Besides this, nothing needs to be done for salvation. We are responsible to spend only whatever we possess. We have no responsibility to spend more than that. A man can't do more than that. If we spend the things, ability and strength etc., completely in rendering service, we shall attain complete salvation. In fact, the body is useful only for the world, not for one's own self, because the body is not for us at all. The body is in fact this human birth is the first as well as the last birth of all births. If a man realizes God, it is the last birth. But if he does not attain God realization, it is the first one of the infinite births. Available in a well, and as the water of the pipe is available only through the tap or the hole, similarly the all-pervading God specially manifests in sacrifice, performance of actions for one's own self and assumption of affinity for the insentient body etc., are the obstacles to God realization. These obstacles are removed when duty is performed without hoping for any reward, and for the welfare of others, and then God, who is ever attained, is naturally realized. Therefore, Lord Krishna is urging Arjuna to perform his duty, by offering several reasons and examples. Link: in order to maintain the world order, it is man's responsibility to perform his duty. Therefore, the Lord in the next verse criticizes a man who does not perform his duty. O Partha, he who does not, in this world, follow the cycle thus set into motion, is sinful, and sensual desires, and lives in vain. 16 Comment. Here the Lord, while concluding the topic started in the 9th verse, addresses Arjuna as Partha to remind him that he is the sons of Pritha, Kunti, who performed her duty even by suffering troubles throughout her life. So he should also perform his duty. In fact, the action which he was regarding as terrible, was not really terrible, it was a sacrifice, duty. He who performs his duty, follows the wheel of creation, while he who does not perform his duty, does not follow this cycle. As a broken fragment of the wheel of a chariot, gives a series of jerks to the charioteer, as well as to the driver, similarly a man who does not follow the wheel of creation, creates an obstacle in the smooth running of that wheel. As the limbs and body, have close affinity, so have man and the world. When a man performs his duty by renouncing desire, feeling of mine, attachment and egoism etc., he gratifies the entire creation. Sensual is he, who enjoys the worldly objects through his senses, by having desire and being attached to the sense objects. Such a person is inferior even to beasts, because beasts, instead of performing sinful actions, are purified by receiving the fruit of their sins of the past. But a man committing new sins, has a downfall, and by creating disturbance in the wheel of creation, hurts the entire creation. Again, the life of such a man is sinful, because he who wants to enjoy sensual pleasures, cannot escape sin. The person who hankers after selfishness, pride, pleasures and prosperity, causes suffering to others, and thus he is of a sinful nature. Saint Tulasi in the Ramakairodamanasa declares, those who are malicious, engrossed in adultery, slanderous and hanker after the riches of others, are violent sinful devils in human forms. 739. The Lord condemns such a person who does not perform his duty by saying, that such a person lives in vain, i.e., it will be better if he were dead. If such a man dies, people will not have to suffer without him. During the exile of Lord Rama, the wild tribe said, that if they did not steal anyone's clothes and utensils, it meant that they were rendering service to him. Manasa 2/251/2. Similarly, such persons who do not perform their duty, should not at least disturb the wheel of creation. By doing so they could render service to creation. Such a person who does not follow the cycle of creation, has been said to be a thief. 3/12, feeding on sin. 3:13, and a sinful and senile person, who lives in vain by this verse. Goswami Tulasi also in the Ramakairodamanasa, declares about such a person, his envy is like fire, anger like that of the god of death, sins and evils are like the treasure of the god of wealth, and he does evil to others like the comet. It is good if such a person like Kumbhakarna goes on sleeping for a long time. 114/3. Appendix. The description, which has been given from the 9th to this verse, means only to render selfless service to others. Link. The Lord has condemned the person who does not perform his duty, in order to renounce his affinity with the world, in the preceding verse. Now, in the next 2 verses, he talks about the enlightened soul, who having performed his duty, has renounced affinity for the world. But, for a person who takes delight only in the self, is satisfied with the self and content in the self alone, verily there is no further work to be done by him. 17 Comment. Here the term to, but, has been used to differentiate a person, who has become enlightened having performed his duty, from the person who does not perform his duty, as described in the preceding verse. So long as a person assumes his affinity for the world, he rejoices in the sensual pleasures, wife, sons and family, remains satisfied with food and is content in riches. But they cannot provide him with perfect and lasting rejoicing, satisfaction and contentment, because the world is ever-changing, insentient and perishable while the self is uniform, sentient and imperishable. So how can the self be satisfied and be contented with the world, when there is not even the least affinity between the two? A man cannot take delight in the world constantly. A newly married couple take delight in each other, but that joy or attraction does not continue to exist after the birth of only or two babies. Sometimes, an old woman is heard saying about her husband, "It is good, if the old man dies." The satisfaction provided by food and riches etc., is momentary and temporary, also. In fact, the worldly objects cannot provide lasting delight, satisfaction and contentment to man. If these had provided real delight, satisfaction and contentment, man would have never felt their absence. In the self, delight, satisfaction and contentment naturally exist because the self is real and the real never ceases to be. Gita 2:16. As the real always exists, there is no deficiency in it, and without that no desire is born. So there is no desire in the self. But when the self by an error assumes its affinity with the world, it seeks delight, satisfaction and contentment in the world, and has a desire for the worldly objects. When one desire is satisfied and the second is not born, at that time, he remains free from any desire, and that state of freedom provides him with delight. But, man by error thinks that he has received delight, satisfaction and contentment by the satisfaction of desire. Had he got that delight by the satisfaction of desire, that delight should have continued unabated and there would have been no more desire for that object again. In fact, it does not happen so. When one desire is satisfied, another new desire is born and the process continues. When one has desire, it means he feels a deficiency, and when he receives the desired object, he becomes a slave to it. Thus a man with a desire ever remains sad. Here, a point needs attention. A striver rightly thinks that lack of desire is the root of delight, while desire is the root of sorrows. But the people attached to the world think otherwise. They think that they get delight in having received objects or things and they are sad without them. If they realize the reality like the strivers, they could also get rid of desires. People who perform actions with the expectation of fruit deserve to follow the discipline of action. Srimad Bhagavata 11/20/7. Such people derive joy, satisfaction and contentment out of the world. So the Lord, having described such persons who perform actions without the desire for their fruit, declares that such strivers, unlike the worldly people, are delighted, contented and satisfied in the self. Gita 2:55. In fact, delight, satisfaction and contentment are not different from each other, yet they seem to be different, because of a person's affinity for the world. As soon as this affinity is renounced, an enlightened soul is delighted, satisfied and contented in the self. Their difference which seems to exist, disappears. The Lord in this verse, has used the terms Eva, only, and Ca, and, twice, while further in the 18th verse, he has used these terms, once. That shows, that a karmagi, one who follows the discipline of action, does not suffer a shortage of delight, satisfaction and contentment, and needs no greater bliss than this one. Gita 6:22. The aim of the performance of actions for a man, is to attain salvation or God realization. When this aim is achieved by anyone following the disciplines of actions, knowledge or devotion, nothing remains to be done, known and acquired by him, and that is the supreme achievement of a human life. In the self, there is no shortage. But so long as a man, because of his affinity for the world, feels shortage in himself, he performs actions for himself by regarding the body as I and mine. In that case there remains some work which needs to be done by him. But when he, instead of performing the actions for himself, performs them for others, such as body, senses, mind, intellect, life, breath, parents, wife, sons, family, society, country and the world, his affinity for the world is renounced. When his affinity for the world is completely renounced, nothing remains to be done by him, because there is no activity then in the self. Whatever action is performed, that is performed because of affinity for the world, by worldly things. Therefore, /ok is to be done by those who have affinity for the world. An action is performed when there is desire to acquire something, and desire is born of want. The enlightened souls have no want, so they have to do nothing. When through the discipline of action, an enlightened soul is delighted, satisfied and contented in the self, and nothing remains to be done, known and acquired by him, he transcends prescription and prohibition. Though such a God-realized soul rises above the ordinance of the scriptures, yet his actions are in accordance with the scriptural injunctions, and these are examples for others. The expression tasya karyam na vidyate does not mean that no action is performed by that God-realized soul, but it means that though no work remains to be done by him, actions are performed by him, for the welfare of others. As the activities such as lowering and raising of eyelids, breathing and digestion etc., go on automatically, similarly, all exemplary activities prescribed by the scriptures are automatically performed by the enlightened soul, as he has no sense of doership. Appendix A. Karanagi performs all actions with a selfless motive to serve the world. As the Ganges is worshipped with Ganges water, similarly by applying the body, senses, mind, intellect and ego, which he has received from the world, in rendering service to the world, the connection with the body and the world is snapped off and the self or divinity is revealed. Therefore he takes delight and is gratified and is contented in the self alone. The worldly injunction and prohibition both are indeed prohibition, negation, because these two can't last, remain. A Karanagi having renounced affinity for the world rises above all prescriptions and prohibitions. Tasya kari arna vidyate, he has no duty to perform. For him in this world, there is no gain whatsoever in the performance of an action or its non-performance, nor does he have any self-interest in other beings. 18. Comment. Everyone has a tendency to do some work or the other, for himself. So long as a man has the tendency to acquire worldly things, some work remains to be done by him. He is bound by the desire of acquiring something or the other. Performance of duty is inevitable in order to get rid of that desire. Actions are performed in two ways, either in order to satisfy desire or to get rid of desire. Common men work in order to satisfy their desires, while a Karamagi performs actions in order to get rid of desires. Therefore, an enlightened soul being free from desire has not the least affinity for the performance of duty. Actions are performed by him, automatically without any selfish motive, for the welfare of the entire creation. Such a God-realized soul realizes that all the worldly objects, body, senses, mind and intellect etc., are not his own, but these belong to the world. So, these should be utilized for the world. This is because no action can be performed without the help of the world. Apart from this, matter required for action is also an offshoot of the world. It is in no way related to one's own self. Therefore, nothing is ours. The cosmos can never be meant for an individual. Here lies the fault with man, that he tries to utilize the cosmic entity for his individual purposes. This generates unrest. If he utilizes his body, senses, mind, intellect and matter etc., for universal use, he can get a state of quietude. This characteristic exists in an accomplished Karmagi, that all his so-called body, senses, mind, intellect and matter etc., are utilized for the service of the entire world. Thus, he is totally unconcerned about his bodily activities. Even then, a great person instinctively performs excellent deeds, ideal for the generality of men. Thus, by utilizing these for the world, he attains great peace and his actions are exemplary. He, who assumes his affinity for the body, senses, mind and intellect etc., and remains inclined towards indolence and sloth, does not want to perform actions, because he wants to enjoy pleasure which arises from sleep, indolence and sloth, and which is declared to be of the nature of ignorance. Gita 18:39. But, how can a great soul, who transcends even the Sattvic happiness, be inclined towards pleasure, arising out of ignorance? When he has not even the least affinity for body etc., how can he be inclined towards indolence and heedlessness etc.? A vital fact. Generally strivers attach importance to actionlessness. They want to place themselves in trance, samadhi, and, being completely unattached with actions, so that no thoughts are left to act. This is an excellent and useful thing no doubt, but not as a principle. Small truth. Though inaction is superior to action, yet it is not the goal. Inclination and abstention, both are within the realm of nature. Up to the nirvikalpa trance, Every stage is within the reign of Prakriti, because deviation is possible even at this stage. Every action takes place in Pralkadati, even a deviation from trance involves action, and without action such deviation is impossible. Therefore, like walking, speaking, laughing and hearing etc., sleeping, sitting, standing, keeping quiet, fainting and going into a trance, also are actions. The real essence, conscious self, is free from inclination and abstention both. The self is an untainted illuminator of action and inaction both. When a person identifies the self with the body, actions are divided into two classes: performance and non-performance. But in fact, both of these belong to the same class. Till attachment to the body persists, non-performance of an action is also an action. As go is a verb, so stand is also a verb, and both involve activity, though in the former the activity is clearly seen, while in the latter it is not apparent. The question of performance or non-performance of actions arises only when a man has affinity with a body. Unless such affinity is there, no action is possible. An enlightened soul who renounces his total affinity for nature and its evudes, the insentient matter, realizes the self, which transcends both activity and non-activity. Therefore, a striver should renounce his affinity for matter, egoism and attachment to the body. The self, tattva, ever remains the same, as always. When the great soul has not the least selfish affinity for a body in the world, all his actions are automatically performed for the welfare of others. As limbs of a body are ever engaged in doing good for the body, a fragment of the world, of that enlightened soul, ever remains engaged in doing good to the world. Moreover, he has not the least pride or desire for fruit or selfish motive, like a hand when it washes the face. In the preceding verse, the Lord declared that there exists no work that needs to be done by a God-realized soul. In order to explain the reason, the Lord mentions three factors. Such a soul has no interest in what is done. 2. He has no interest in what is not done. 3. He does not depend on anything or creature for any interest of his. In fact, the self has no interest in what is done or what is not done, and has no affinity with either any being or thing, because no action is performed by the self. All actions are performed only when the self assumes its affinity for nature and the things born of nature. Therefore, no action is to be performed for the self. So long as a man has a desire to do, to acquire and to live, and he is afraid of death, he has got to perform actions. But when he renounces this desire and is not afraid of death, he has not to perform action, but action, duty, is automatically performed by him. One who is susceptible to deviation from duty needs advice. An important fact in the Gita, Lord Krishna explains the marks of a God-realized soul according to the discipline which they follow as strivers. The same description has been given here, in the 17th and the 18th verses. The topic of the discipline of action begins from the 39th verse of the 2nd chapter, but the gist has been explained in the 47th verse of the 2nd chapter, when the Lord declares it in 4 stages. 1. Thy right is to work only. 2. Have no desire for its fruit. 3. Do not be the cause of the fruit of action. 4. And let thy attachment be not towards an action. In this verse, 3:18, is the description of a God-realized soul, who has attained perfection through Kanaga, as described in the previous verse. Whatever has been said there, in 247, in the second and the third point for the striver, the same has been said, in the second half of this verse, for the God-realized soul, that he has no affinity for any creature or thing. Similarly, whatever has been stated in the first and the fourth point for the striver, the same has been said, in the first half of this verse for a God-realized soul, that he has no interest in what is done or what is not done. Thus, in the verses 17th and 18th, the description of the marks of a God-realized soul, who has realized him, through the discipline of action, has been given. According to the discipline of action, the 18th verse should have preceded the 17th verse, because when a God-realized soul has no interest in what is done or what is not done, and when he does not depend on any creature for any interest of his, he gets joy, satisfaction and contentment in his own self. But, in the 16th verse the Lord declared, he who does not perform his duty, lives in vain. Therefore, in the 17th verse, by using the expression yatu, who but, the Lord explains that if a God-realized soul does not perform his duty, He does not live in vain, but his life is very useful, as he has attained the aim of human life. Therefore, nothing remains to be done by him. The state in which nothing remains to be done, can be attained even by a common man, by performing his duty efficiently without expecting any reward, because everyone deserves to attain him. The practice of Kanaga can be performed in all circumstances. The desire for sensual pleasure is the main obstacle to the performance of one's duty. So, if a striver wipes out this desire for pleasure by serving others, without having any selfish motive, he can attain supreme peace by getting rid of all pains and sorrows of life. As far as the supreme peace is concerned, everyone is equally deserving to attain it, while it is not possible for everyone to have worldly possessions in equal share. Appendix: in the world, performance of action and non-performance of action are related expressions. Therefore I have to do nothing, this is also an action. But in Godhood an action is natural and automatic. The reason is that the divine entity has nothing to do with action or inaction. Therefore a God-realized karmagi has neither any relation with a thing, nor with a person, nor with an action. See Yavati Sthati Nengate, Gita 14:23. From his viewpoint nothing exists except the divinity. Link: the Lord in the next verse explains what a striver should do in order to attain the state of a God-realized soul, described in the preceding verse. Therefore, perform duty efficiently without attachment, for by actions without attachment, man attains the supreme. 19. Comment: the term tasmat, therefore, has been used to connect the preceding verse with this verse. In the preceding verse, the Lord declared that actions are performed by a God-realized soul, for the welfare of others, though there is no need for him to perform these. Therefore, the Lord uses the term tasmat, to make Arjuna to realize God, by performing his duty without expecting any reward. The reason is, that the self has no interest in what is done or what is not done. Actions are ever performed for others, not for the self. When the striver performs actions for others, his attachment to perform actions disappears, and he gets established in the self. He is attached to them. When he thinks I am body, the body is mine, and regards the perishable objects such as body etc., as significant. It is attachment, not action, which leads to one's downfall. Being attached to the body, senses, mind, intellect and other mundane objects etc., a man performs actions in order to derive pleasure out of them. This attachment for the materialistic objects etc. leads him to the cycle of birth and death. The Lord declares, attachment to the modes born of nature is the cause of the birth of soul in good and evil wombs. Gita 13:21. When the striver performs actions without attachment, his affinity for the insentient matter is renounced. All actions of a striver who performs them, being free from attachment, are automatically for the welfare of all creatures, while the person who is attached to mundane objects and actions etc., cannot do good to others. So far, we have used mundane materials such as a body etc., for our own pleasure and prosperity. Therefore, we are indebted to the world. We can repay our debt by performing our duty for the welfare of the world. When we perform action for ourselves, instead of being free from debt, we run into debt, more and more. Therefore, we have to take birth in the world again and again, in order to free ourselves of debt. By performing actions for the welfare of others, we get out of the old debt and we cease to run into new debt, as we perform actions in a disinterested way. Thus, we are liberated from bondage. An action cannot be performed constantly, but attachment remains constant. So the Lord by the expression satata ihasakta urges Arjuna to be constantly free from attachment. A striver should perform his duty, prescribed by the scriptures constantly without attachment. In fact, attachment also does not remain constant. Even when the world itself is not constant, it is ever changing. How can its attachment remain constant? In spite of that, in the assumed ego, attachment seems to be there, constantly. Karyam viz, duty is that which can be done and must be done. In other words, duty is action, which must be performed for the welfare of others, according to the ordinance of the scriptures and according to one's capacity, by renouncing one's selfish motive. In this way, duty is linked to the welfare of others. Everyone has the freedom and capability to perform one's duty. It can be performed very easily, but it is because of heedlessness, indolence and desire for fruit, that its performance seems difficult. A man can perform his duty independently under all circumstances. Attachment perishes through the performance of duty, while it enhances through the non-performance of duty. By performing duty for the welfare of others, we get rid of our present attachment, and by not expecting any reward from them get rid of future attachment. The term samukra means that the duty must be performed very carefully, enthusiastically, promptly and duly, so that the aim may be attained. If there is the least dereliction of duty, it creates a great hurdle in the path of a karmagi. A man's duty according to his caste, order of life, nature and circumstances prescribed by the scriptures is sahaja karma, innate duty. One should not give up one's innate duty, even though it may have flaws, Gita 1848, because by doing so, one does not incur sin, Gita 1847. So, the Lord seems to urge Arjuna to perform his innate duty of waging war, because he is a kshatriya, a member of the warrior class, even though the act may seem terrible to him. An innate duty must be performed without attachment, as it leads to equanimity. Something noteworthy: when a being is born as a human being, he is provided with all the matter, such as body, riches, property etc., and he has to leave behind all the materials here. When he departs, it proves that he has been granted this material in the same way as a clerk is provided with the material in the office, so that he may work with it. But it does not mean that it is his. As a clerk is paid for doing the office work, similarly a striver who performs actions for the world, his affinity for the world is renounced and he realizes his identity, unity, with God. This unity with God is his reward. This world is the field for practicing spiritual discipline. Whatever material has been provided to us here is only for practicing spiritual practices, rather than for pleasure and prosperity. It is neither ours nor for us. If and when we gain our own objectives, viz., the supreme bliss, God realization, self-realization, nothing remains to be gained after that, i.e., there remains no desire for anything else. Gita 6:22. But we may acquire innumerable worldly things. The desire to acquire more is never satisfied, it rather enhances. When by error, a person accepts a thing as his own and for him he is attached to it. The discipline of action is an easy and good method to wipe out this error. A kanagi, who without assuming a thing as his own and for him, uses it in order to render service to others, is easily liberated from the worldly bondage, as he performs actions for the world, by renouncing attachment, a feeling of mind and desire etc., for the same. Thus the flow of his actions is towards the world and he is liberated. On the other hand, a common person who performs actions with attachment, with feelings of mind and desire etc., the flow of actions is towards him and so he is tied to these. It is a man who establishes a link with the world, and not the world with him. A striver should perform actions for the welfare of the world without attachment, having no desire for their fruit. His present affinity for the things and persons of the world is renounced, by rendering service to them, and with things and persons of the future by having no desire for these. In a fair, volunteers render service to the public, without expecting any reward. So they sleep soundly without even remembering any person of the public. Similarly, a striver who serves others without expecting any return, not ever honor and praise etc., does not remember them and is thus easily liberated from the worldly bondage. In the discipline of action, actions are performed for the welfare of others, without any attachment. Attachment can be wiped out only when actions are performed according to the scriptural injunctions. Manasa 3/16/1. Attachment can never be wiped out by performing forbidden actions. As in the 34th verse of the 13th chapter, the Lord has mentioned attainment to the Supreme by the term Param, the Supreme, for a Sankhyogi, follower of the discipline of knowledge. Similarly, it has been mentioned here by the same term for a Karmagi, follower of the discipline of action. It means that the striver according to his taste, inclination and faith, attains God realization by any one of the disciplines of action, knowledge or devotion. Gita 5:4-5. God is he who pervades everywhere, every time, who is everyone's and is attainable to everyone, undoubtedly and automatically. Question: how can the pride of doership, which is an obstacle to God realization, be wiped out? Answer: common people perform actions for themselves, thinking that they are the doers. But a karmagi thinks that whatever he has acquired from the world is not his, but it is of the world. Therefore, with the body, senses, mind, intellect, money and material etc., which he has acquired from the world, he renders service to the world. Thus his pride of doership perishes. A karmagi does not perform actions in order to enjoy their fruits. He regards the body as a fragment of the world. Therefore, there is nothing special to be proud of if the body renders service to the world, in the same way as a hand is not proud of rendering a great service to the face by washing it. A man performs actions in order to achieve a goal. As soon as the action is over, he gets engrossed in that goal. As a businessman starts business in order to earn money, but as soon as his transaction is over, he starts counting the money without even thinking of customers etc., who had come to buy articles from his shop. A worldly man, having a mundane aim, remains engrossed in the world, but he cannot be identified with the world, in spite of doing so, because the world is kaleidoscopic and insentient, while the self is uniform and sentient. But the striver who performs actions having God realization as his aim gets identified with God, whether he realizes this fact or not, because both of these are uniform and sentient. In this state of identification, no question can arise regarding the pride of doership. Actions have a beginning and an end. So a person who performs an action also ceases to be a doer as soon as the action ends. But being under an illusion, he regards himself as a doer, even when he does not perform any action. Thus by considering himself as a doer constantly, his pride of doership, instead of perishing, enhances. An orator considers himself an orator even when he does not make a speech. He regards himself superior to the audience and wants the people to honor and serve him and to fulfill his necessities. But if he regards himself as an orator only, during the period of a speech and not afterwards, he will expect no reward from the audience, and thus his doership will merge in his aim. As an eater regards himself as an eater only when he eats food, a karmagi also regards himself as a doer only when he performs actions and not at other times. Suppose a karmagi delivers discourses and he has won high fame. In spite of that, if an occasion arises to hear a discourse, he can easily listen to it, without expecting any honor, respect and status, as now he considers himself a listener, not a speaker, without any superiority complex. He becomes a hearer or a speaker, according to the need of the moment. Thus his pride of doership does not remain constant. A thing which changes actually does not exist. So how can a relationship with it remain constant? By thinking so, a striver comes to realize his egolessness. An actor in a drama plays the role of Harischandra, but while playing that role, he does not regard himself as a real Harischandra. Similarly, a karmagi, while performing all actions according to the scriptural injunctions, does not regard himself as a doer. He, like an actor, serves the world with the worldly things, without regarding these as his or for himself. Thus he has no pride of doership, in the least. Similarly, he accepts his affinity for his kith and kin, while serving them, only in order to serve them. He performs his duty to the best of his capacity and resources, towards his wife, children and other members, even though they are ugly, hard-hearted and quarrelsome. Moreover, he thinks that his wife or children are not only his, but also of others. For example, his wife is her children's mother, her father's daughter, her brother's sister and so on. Thus, they have also a claim on her. Similar is the case with other relatives such as father, sons and brothers etc. So a striver performs his duty efficiently, like an actor without thinking of the duty of others. By having the pride of doership, a man thinks of the duty of others and by thinking so, he deviates from a duty, while a karmagi does not accept his constant affinity for his caste, order of life, sect and circumstances etc., and so he performs his duty efficiently. A thing which is not constantly in existence, is for that matter, not in existence at all. Thus, the sense of doership of a karmagi automatically perishes. A vital fact: a man has his identity with God, if he has no sense of doership unless he ignores the reality. As a swing while moving, stops still for a fraction of a second, at the rope end, in the same way, there is always the state of actionlessness, equanimity, after a swinging action ends and a second one begins. Secondly, if we perceive in the right perspective, we come to know that as the rope of the swing when it moves, remains straight, a man also remains in a state of equanimity, even while working. If he wants to realize this fact, he can do so, as soon as an action is over. In case a striver is ever careful, in this respect, he can realize equanimity or his identity with God, where there is no sense of doership. In order to wipe out the pride of doership, a striver should distinguish the real which really exists, from the unreal, illusion, which seems to exist. The world which is changing always is illusory, while the all-pervading Lord is real, and he is automatically attainable to everyone from Brahma, the Creator, to even an ant, equally. The world which seems to exist, is every second getting destroyed. The senses, mind and intellect etc., with which the world is seen, reflect nothing but illusion. The all-pervading Lord who ever exists, is always attainable to us. Therefore, in the Gita it has been declared, the unreal has no existence and the real never ceases to be. 2/16. All the worldly objects and actions are nothing but an illusion. Actionlessness exists at the beginning and the end of every action. And this is a rule, that whatever is at the beginning and the end also remains in the middle. Therefore, actionlessness automatically exists, even when an action is going on. That actionless essence, viz., the sentient or God, is the illuminator of both actions and actionlessness, and he transcends the two. It is because of our attachment, affinity, to the illusion, objects, actions and persons etc., that we cannot realize God. As soon as attachment is renounced, ever attainable God is realized. Therefore, when being free from attachment, we apply this illusion, body and objects etc., in the service of the illusory world. The flow of this illusion, body and objects etc., is towards the world, and God, the divine essence that is ever attainable, remains. Link: has there been any person who attained perfection, God realization, through the performance of action, without attachment? The Lord answers the question in the next verse. It was by action alone that Janaka and others attained perfection. Thou should perform selfless action, also for the good of the world. 20. Comment: the term Adi stands for beginning as well as like. Here the former meaning does not apply, because before Janaka, there had been great souls like Vivasvan, Vivasvadamanu and King Ikshvaku, who had attained perfection through the performance of action. Gita 4:1-2. Therefore, here it is used in the latter sense, which means that some great souls like Janaka, before and after him, leading householders' life, attained salvation by action. This discipline of action is very old. By this discipline, Janaka and several other great souls have attained salvation or God realization. Therefore, if anyone at present or in future wants to realize God through the path of action, he, without regarding the body and the objects as his own, should apply these in the service of the world by considering these as the world's. In fact, they belong to the world. By doing so, one's affinity with the world is easily renounced and God is attained. Therefore, the discipline of action is an easy, good and independent means to realize God. Here the expression karmana eva stands for the expression asakto hi akarang karma, i.e., performance of action without attachment. By performing the actions thus, a man is liberated from their bondage, otherwise he is enslaved. Maha, Santi. 241-7. It is the characteristic of the style of the Gita, that the Lord briefly repeats the main idea of the preceding verse in the next one also, which is of great help to a striver. Performance of action without attachment, explained in the preceding verse, is explained in brief in this verse by the expression karmana eva. Similarly, he will explain the main point, described in the 6th verse of the 12th chapter, again in the 7th verse in brief, in the expression, whose mind is set on me. Here the Lord, instead of the expression karmana eva, could have used the expression yajna eva. But here the topic is of the performance of action without attachment. Therefore, the Lord has used this expression, which suits the context. In fact, the sentient Lord cannot be realized through insentient actions alone. The stumbling block to God realization is removed through the performance of action, without attachment. Then the all-pervading God is realized. A vital fact pertaining to God realization: generally people think that they can attain God by performing action or by making effort. They hold that, as they have to make a lot of effort in order to meet a high officer, they will have to make much more effort, in the form of penance, fasts etc., in order to attain God, who is the Lord of infinite universes. But that is an error on their part. Human life has a great affinity for actions. So in the Gita it is mentioned, meeting death when passion prevails, the embodied soul, is born among those attached to action. 14:15. Therefore, a man has an inclination for action and he wants to attain his aim through actions. He believes that as the worldly things can be acquired through actions, so God could also be realized by action. So he tries to attain him through action. But the fact is, that the imperishable Lord cannot be attained by actions. Only the perishable worldly things can be acquired through actions, because all actions are performed with the help of a perishable body, senses and mind etc., while God is realized by total renunciation of affinity for the perishable. Every action has a beginning and an end, so its fruit is also perishable. A thing which is at some distance, unacquired, with the point of view of space or time can be acquired by action. Thus, only the worldly things which are perishable, changeful and confined, can be acquired through action. But the Lord who pervades everywhere and who is uniform and imperishable, cannot be attained through action. He is naturally attainable. Worldly things cannot be acquired by thinking alone, but the Lord can be realized by thought, because he is close to us. The fact is, that the Lord is not attained by thinking alone. But when a striver thinks of the Lord, he stops thinking of the world. As soon as thinking about the world is renounced, the ever-attainable Lord is realized. Not only the all-pervading God is never away from us, but his being away from us is impossible also. He is much nearer, even the supposedly closeness, which is limited spatially and temporally, but God knows no limitation. In order to experience such a close and ever-available God, it is deceiving one's self to apply logic and arguments as if it were a worldly object. Worldly things cannot be acquired only by having a keen desire, while God can be realized only by having a keen desire. Human life is meant to have a keen desire for God realization, not for sense enjoyment. This desire is not aroused, because man has a desire for worldly pleasures and prosperity. If desire for pleasure and prosperity is renounced, a keen desire for God realization may be aroused instantly, and God may also be realized immediately. It is necessary to clearly understand the difference between the aim and the desire for fruit. God realization is the aim of human life, while desire to acquire perishable things is the desire for fruit of action. An aim is achieved, while desire for fruit of action is wiped out. Self-realization or God realization is the aim, rather than the fruit. Action which is performed in order to attain an aim cannot be called an action with desire for fruit. Therefore, a karmagi performs all actions with an objective rather than with a desire for fruit. In karmaga, discipline of action, prescribed actions are performed with the aim of renouncing affinity for actions, matter. Such a striver performs actions for the welfare of others, by renouncing selfish desire for fruit, while a common man performs actions for himself, with the desire for fruit. In the case of the latter, the action is turned into fruit, and so the fruit has its affinity for the action while aim has no affinity for action. When the striver performs action for the welfare of others, without expecting any reward, his misconception that the Lord is far away from him is removed. Lokasangrahim vapi sampasayankarcha marhasi. The word loka includes three aspects: l. Human world; 2. Creatures of the world; 3. All the scriptures, except the Vedas. Performance of actions, of daily routine, for the human world and its creatures, according to the ordinance of the scriptures, is lokasangraha, maintenance of the world. Lokasangraha means to persuade the people to come to the real, by dissuading them from the unreal. If a great soul, through his word and action, persuades people to come towards the real, from the unreal, it leads them to salvation. If he performs his duty merely as a show, it is not lokasangraha. He should perform his duty sincerely, according to his caste, order of life and sect etc. No action is as such either superior or inferior. Whatever action is performed, according to one's caste, order of life, sect, time and circumstances, is regarded as superior. Actions are regarded as superior and inferior according to their form and fruit. When desire for fruit is renounced, all actions lead to perfection or God realization. As far as renunciation of affinity for the insentient matter is concerned, all actions, superior or inferior, are of equal importance. No one can live without the help of others. A body is acquired from the parents' knowledge and education is received from preceptors. Foodstuff, clothes, a house and other necessities of life are prepared by others. Thus everyone has to depend on others for his necessities. Therefore, every person is indebted to others. In order to get out of this debt, he has to perform his duty for the welfare of others, without any selfish motive. When he does not regard the body and other worldly objects in the least as his own or for him, he is freed from the debt. Appendix. Here the expression proves that karma is an independent discipline for salvation. The kings such as Janaka etc. also attained perfection by performing actions because they ruled over their empire in order to serve others and to comfort them rather than for their selfish end. This expression means that you should set an example to the people that by practicing karma a supreme goal is attained. Oratory is regarded as superior to sweeping. Less charity seems to bear less fruit while more charity seems to bear more fruit. Link. How action leads to the maintenance of the world is discussed in the next verse. Whatsoever an ideal person does, he is followed by others, as well. Whatever standard he sets, the world follows the same. 21. Comment. An ideal man is he who knows the reality about the world, body etc., and the self. He realizes that the body, senses, mind, intellect, riches, property and family etc., are not his, but these belong really to the world. Not only this, but he does not regard renunciation, dispassion, devotion, knowledge and other virtues also as his own, because by doing so, his egoism is nourished, which is an obstacle to self-realization. The feelings, I am a renouncer, I am dispassionate, I am a devotee and I am a knower nourish his egoism, and thus these are stumbling blocks to self-realization. There is no personal ego at all in a self-realized person. The prime ego remains only for common dealings and is engaged in rendering service to the world, as it belongs to the world. Gita 7:13-5. The body, riches, family, position, ability and authority etc., which have been provided to us by the world, are neither meant for our pleasure nor for our possession, but these are for service of others. He who enjoys these himself, is verily a thief. Gita 3:12. All of these belong to the world, and so great men utilize these in rendering service to the world. They have a natural inclination for the welfare of all beings. The feeling of selflessness causes unity and love, while a feeling of selfishness causes strife. The former leads to salvation while the latter to degradation. By regarding the body as one, mine and for me, the feeling of selfishness is caused. Great men who do not accept a feeling of affinity for the body have no selfish motive, so all their actions are for the welfare of others. The sight, touch, talk and thinking of such great men automatically lead to the welfare of people. Even the air which touches them does good to the people. Such great men are of two kinds, of the hermit kind, who lead a holy and lonely life. Such hermits are ideal only as hermits, not for common folk. 2. Carry a model for others who are an example to others. Their actions are, according to the scriptural injunctions. They have neither egoism nor a sense of mine. Their actions are automatically performed for the welfare of the world. They leave their sweet smell by destroying bad smell, just like a blooming flower. Such great men have their identity with the Lord, because both of them work for the welfare of the entire world. Different limbs of a body constitute the body and remain ever prepared to help one another when anyone is injured, and they consider its recovery as that middle dot of the entire body. Similarly, all the beings of the world, in spite of being different, are one and the same, and the performance of duty by one is for the welfare of the entire world. As far as actions and words of the great men are concerned, they leave a gross impression which is restricted, because actions are limited. But, as far as their feelings are concerned, their influence is subtle and limitless, as their feelings are limitless. They set examples for other people, by performing duty, according to their caste, social order, sect etc., and make a strong impression on others. Though a great man does not perform any action for himself, as he has no pride of doership, yet people feel that he performs actions. So the term Makarati, doer, has been used. Actions are automatically performed by him, for the welfare of others, without any selfish motive. Though he has nothing to do, Gita 3:17, and has no egoism, Gita 2171, yet duty is naturally and efficiently performed by him, which is automatically for the welfare of the entire world. An important fact: it is generally observed that whatever actions are performed and whatever standards are set by great men, these are followed by common people. Common people who attach importance to wealth and position follow the examples set by millionaires and leaders, regarding them as great, though they may not be really so. The rich people and leaders resort to evil practices such as falsehood, forgery, dishonesty, thefts and corruption, to gain riches, fame and status in society. The common people who consider them great follow those evil practices. Thus, evils become rampant in the society, without any schooling or teaching. How shocking and surprising it is, that at present a millionaire is regarded as great, but a devotee, who chants the name of the Lord 100,000 times a day, is not considered great. People do not think that when a millionaire dies, he will not take a single penny with him, while the whole wealth of chanting of the Lord's name will ultimately go with the devotee. Great and noble men, such as teachers, preachers, priests, leaders and rulers etc., who hold positions of honor in society, should perform their duties very carefully, so that they may leave a good impression upon other people, who may follow the standards set by noble men. They are just like drivers, who carry their passengers to their destinations or might cause accidents. Sayat pramanam karut lokastid anuvartate. A great man is free from such evils as desire, feeling of mind, attachment, selfishness and favoritism, and he does not attach importance to perishable objects. His word automatically influences people and they follow his preaching. Here a doubt may arise, why the Lord has used, he sets a standard and also whatever a great man does when neither one of these might have been sufficient. The clarification is, that though the deed is important, yet a great man cannot perform acts of the people from different castes, orders of life etc. He sets a standard by his word, quoting scriptures and historical characters, so that people of other castes, orders of life and creed etc., by performing their duty, sincerely and promptly may attain perfection. Gita 1845. By following his advice, they start to perform their duty according to their castes, creeds and orders of life etc. Though the scope of such deeds is limited while that of standard set, word, is wide, yet the Lord has used 5 terms yat, tat, and, specially, eva, for the deeds of a great man. He has used only 2 terms yat and tat for the standard set by him. It means that the deeds of a great man have 5 times the effect, while standard set, word, has only twice the effect. Therefore, the Lord in the 20th verse of this chapter, has laid special emphasis on the performance of duty, for the welfare of the world. If a great man instead of performing his duty, according to his caste, creed and stage of life etc., preaches the gospel as a standard only, it will not influence people. They will think that these are merely precepts, which need not be translated into practice, because the man himself is only preaching, not practicing. Therefore, a great man has to do good to the people by performing his duty, as well as by setting standards, i.e., through word. Only those people who have faith in a great man follow his deeds and the set standard, word. But if a person does not regard a great man as really great, he will not follow the deeds and standard, word, set by him. In modern times people do not have much inclination for spiritualism, in spite of a lot of preaching. The reason is, that preachers themselves do not practice what they preach. So it is a shot in the air. But on the other hand, there are preachers who believe in the maxim example is better than precept. Their shot hits the target and inspires men to practice spiritual discipline. Spiritual discourses leave some impression on almost everyone, but those who are devotees and have reverence are immensely benefited. Link now. The Lord in the next 3 verses, lays emphasis on the performance of duty by citing his own example. There is nothing in the 3 worlds, 0 Arjuna, that is for me to do, nor is there anything unattained, that should be achieved, yet I engage myself in action. 22 Comment: the Lord is not confined to one world. So he is saying that there is nothing in the 3 worlds, that should be done by him. All men, beasts and birds etc., perform actions, in order to attain something or the other. But the Lord mentions here, an uncommon fact, that he also performs action, though there is nothing which should be done or attained by him. Though God has nothing to do for himself, yet he incarnates for the welfare of others and performs action for the protection of the good, for the destruction of the wicked and for the establishment of righteousness. Gita 4/8. The Lord creates the universe, also for the salvation of creatures. He has created heavens, so that beings may reap the fruit of their virtuous actions. 84 lakh forms of lives and hells have been created, so that beings may reap the fruit of their evil actions, while human life has been created so that a human being, having transcended virtues and vices, may attain salvation, viz., God realization. This is possible only when he does nothing for himself. All his activities, actions, with the gross body, thinking with the subtle body, and trance with the causal body, should be applied to the welfare of the world. The reason is, that this threefold body is not of one's own, but it belongs to the world. Therefore, a karmagi considers the body, senses, mind, intellect and all the matter etc., of the world, which in fact belong to the world, and he utilizes them in rendering service to the world. If he uses these in order to enjoy pleasures, he commits a blunder. When a person accepts worldly things as his own, he wants to reap the fruit, and in order to reap the fruit, he has to perform action. Thus, so long as a man perform action in order to attain something, his duty remains to be performed by him. If we give a serious thought to this subject, we realize that a man has to do nothing for himself, because God who is to be attained is ever attainable and the self is eternal, while actions and their fruits are perishable. So, how can the perishable actions and their fruits have their affinity for the imperishable self? Actions have their affinity for the body and the world, rather than the self. Therefore, there is nothing to be done for the self. When there is nothing to be done for the self, how can there be anything to do for God? While talking about an enlightened soul, who has attained perfection through the discipline of action, the Lord, in the 17th and 18th verses of this chapter, declared, "There exists no action to be done by such an enlightened soul who is delighted, satisfied and contented in the self." Such a soul has nothing to do with the performance or non-performance of actions, and he has not the least affinity for selfishness with any being. Yet he performs actions for the welfare of the world. Similarly, the Lord declares, for himself, there is nothing that should be done by him, yet he is engaged in action for the welfare of the world. It means that an enlightened soul becomes identical with the Lord, Gita 14 halves, and as the Lord is a model in the three worlds, Gita 3:23-4:11, similarly an enlightened soul is a model in this world, Gita 3:25. Here, the Lord by the term eva, only, means to say, that he performs actions enthusiastically, promptly, carefully and thoroughly. As the compartments of a train attached to an engine, follow the engine, similarly the Lord and the saints, who have nothing to do and nothing more to attain, perform their duty and other people follow them. These latter people have a desire to act and to attain something or the other. They get rid of this desire by performing their duty, without expecting any reward. If the Lord and the saints did not perform their duty, the people would also follow their path, and they would become indolent and heedless and would perform forbidden actions. So they would not get rid of desires. Therefore, duty is automatically performed by the Lord and the saints, for the welfare of the whole humanity. As the Lord always performs his duty, he never abandons it. Similarly, a striver should always perform his duty, so that he may attain God easily. If an aspirant does not perform his duty, he remains deprived of God realization. Appendix: in Mahabharata the Lord has declared his duty in the three worlds to sage Utanka for the protection and establishment of righteousness. I, manifesting myself in several form and guise, behave, act, accordingly. For, if I did not engage myself in action without care, men would in every way follow my path. 0 Arjuna. If I did not perform action, these worlds would perish, and I would prove to be the creator of confusion and for the destruction of these people. 23-24 Comment: in the 22nd verse, the Lord by a positive inference, laid emphasis on the performance of duty. In this verse, he by the negative inference, mentions the harm that would be done if he did not perform duty. The term "I" has been used here to support the expression "I engage myself in action," used in the preceding verse. The Lord declares that it is impossible for him not to perform action. But if it is so assumed that he does not perform action in this sense, the expression yadi jatu, if ever, has been used. The term atandrita means that actions should be performed very carefully and promptly, renouncing indolence and heedlessness. By doing so, Affinity for actions is renounced. As a stiff twig is easily broken but an elastic one cannot be easily broken. Similarly, affinity for actions is renounced, if these are performed carefully and promptly, but these are not renounced if performed indolently and heedlessly. Therefore, the Lord, in the 19th verse, has used the term samakra, perform well, and here the term matandrita, unwearied, has been used. If there is recollection of an action, time and again, it means that there has been some fault, desire, attachment, incompletion, indolence, heedlessness, indifference etc. in the performance of that action, and so affinity for it has not been renounced. By this expression, the Lord seems to declare that those who follow his path really deserve to be called human beings, while those who while away time because of indolence and heedlessness, and demand their rights, do not deserve to be called human beings even though in human garb. In the 21st verse of this chapter, the Lord declared, "Whatever a great man does, the same is done by others as well, and whatever standard he sets, is followed by others," while here, he declares, "Men in every way follow my path." It means that a great man is a model for the human world only, while the Lord is a model for the three worlds. The Lord incarnates in the world to set an example to other people. He who does not live for himself, and knows the art of living, in the world. The world is an educational institution, where we have to learn how to do good to others, by renouncing desire, attachment and selfishness etc. Through this lesson, we have to attain salvation. The only aim of human life, is to perform our duty by serving others and doing good to them, including members of the own family, and try to lead one another to salvation. The Lord, in the 23rd verse, explained the harm if he performed action unweariedly, and now, in the 24th verse, he explains the harm that could be done if he did not perform action. Though it is not possible for the Lord not to perform action, yet if it is so assumed in this sense, the Lord has used the term sit, f. This expression means that a man should not be attached to an action. Gita 2:47. Therefore, the Lord by citing his own example says that he performs action even though there is nothing unattained, which remains to be attained by him. And if he did not perform action, according to the caste and order of life in which he has incarnated, he would be the creator of confusion of castes and cause destruction of the people. It is so, because by renouncing their duty, men will also got steeped in the mode of ignorance. Gita 14:18. The Lord is a model for the three worlds and all beings follow him. Therefore, if the Lord does not perform his duty, no one in the three worlds will perform his duty, and thus they will suffer a downfall. If the Lord did not perform action, duty, these worlds would perish and he would be the root cause of their destruction, but this is not at all possible. The term Sakara stands for the mixture of two castes. Arjuna, in the 40th and the 41st verses of the first chapter, said, "If I fight, the family will be ruined. With the ruin of the family, the immemorial religious rights of the family will be destroyed. With the destruction of the religious rights, impiety will overcome the whole family. By the prevalence of impiety, the women of the family will become immoral. With the corruption of women, mixing of castes, intermingling of castes, will result." Thus, Arjuna meant to say that war would lead to the mixing of castes. But the Lord contradicts Arjuna's even according to the argument of Arjuna, non-performance of duty, action, is the cause of confusion of castes. Confusion of castes arises only when statement, by citing his own example when he declares that confusion of castes would arise by the non-performance of duty. Therefore, here Lord Krishna seems to urge Arjuna to wage the war, otherwise he would be the creator of mixed castes. An important fact: the Lord answers Arjuna's question, "Why do you urge me to engage in this terrible action?" In the 22nd, the 23rd and the 24th verses, by citing his own example that he engages himself in action even though he has nothing to do personally with it and nothing to attain in the three worlds. Therefore, he urges him to be engaged in action. The Lord gives Arjuna a hint that he had agreed to be his chariot driver, and he as his chariot warrior is performing his duty very carefully and efficiently, so that other people may follow his example as he stands as a model for them. So he should also perform his duty as a Kshatriya, member of the warrior class, carefully and efficiently. Link having described the need for the performance of duty by him, the Lord in the next two verses urges a man of knowledge to perform action carefully. Women are corrupted and they become so by non-performance of their duty. If women believe that they should perform their duty by remaining chaste, in the same way as their husbands perform their duty by sacrificing their lives, they cannot neglect their duty. Thus by performing their duty, they will maintain their chastity and there will be no mixing of castes. As ignorant men act with attachment to action, 0, Bharata, Arjuna, so should the wise act without attachment, thus wishing the welfare of the world. Let no knowing man, realizing the self, unsettle the minds of ignorant people, act with attachment, but he should make others to act, while himself performing his duties with devotion. 25-26 Comment. The expression Sakta Avidvamsa has been used, for those ignorant men attached to worldly pleasures, who have full faith in the scriptures, the ordinance of the scriptures and also the actions sanctioned by the scriptures, and who are neither enlightened nor vile but are attached to actions, pleasures and objects. They are called ignorant, unwise, because of their desire, though they have bookish knowledge of the scriptures. They are well read but are not enlightened. They are called ignorant, because they perform actions for themselves. Such ignorant people perform their duty scrupulously according to the ordinance of the scriptures without heedlessness and indolence, believing that it will not bear fruit, if duty is not performed scrupulously according to strict scriptural ordinance. The Lord urges wise people to act in the same way, without attachment for the welfare of the world. Unattached wise men are enlightened souls who are totally free from desire, of feeling, of mind, lust, favoritism, the supreme state of God realization, which is obtained by men of renunciation, is also attained by men of action. Gita 5:4-5. Yet in that state also there is a little difference in their marks and natures according to the path, each selfishness etc., and who have not the least attachment to body and other objects etc. The expression lokasangraham sikursa, wishing the welfare of the world, has been used for the expression lokasangraham avapi sampasyan, with a view to the welfare of the masses, used in the 20th verse of this chapter and explained in the 21st verse. All actions of wise men are naturally performed for the welfare of the world. They have also no egoistic notion that they are engaged in the welfare of others. As a licentious person is attached to sensual pleasures, the greedy to riches and an infatuated one to the family, the wise are engrossed in the welfare of all beings, naturally and without any egoistic feeling. Because of the total renunciation of affinity for the materialistic world, their so-called bodies, senses, minds and intellects etc., are inclusive of the term loka, world, used in the expression lokasangraha, welfare of the world. People think that such wise men have a desire to be engrossed in the welfare of the world, but in fact they have no desire at all. They regard the body, senses, mind, intellect, objects, position, riches, ability and all other resources as of the world and for the world, which these really are. So all of them automatically remain engaged in rendering service to the world, without any expectation of reward. The terms yatha, as, and tatha, so, have been used to point out that as ignorant men scrupulously act for their selfish motive, so the wise should act, without attachment, aiming at the welfare of the world. When the wise perform actions thus for the welfare and salvation of all beings, good and sweet feelings automatically propagate. Followed. The men of renunciation remain indifferent to actions while men of action perform actions very promptly. This difference is not hard and fast. It is found in some realized souls. An ignorant person performs action scrupulously, in order to reap its fruit, while a wise man is neither attached to the fruit of action, nor has any duty to perform. So, it is possible for him to be indifferent to action. Therefore, the Lord directs him to act without attachment. In the 21st verse, a great, wise man was called a model, but here he has been called a follower. It means that a wise man may either be a leader, model, or a follower, as automatically good to the world is done by him. For example, Lord Rama preaches a gospel to his subjects and also goes into exile by obeying his father. In both cases, welfare of the world is done by him because he has nothing to do either with the performance or non-performance of such actions. A wise man who performs actions without attachment, having no desire for its fruit, automatically leaves an impression on the ignorant people, who are attached to action, whether it is clearly noted or not. Not only people, but beasts and birds are also influenced by such feelings and actions. Something noteworthy so long as a man does not perform prescribed actions without desire for fruit, his cycle of birth and death continues. As long as he works for himself, he has to act, because the self is eternal, but an action and its fruit are perishable. Therefore, it is everyone's obligatory duty to work for the welfare of others, without any selfish motive. The discipline of action, performance of action without desire for fruit, seems difficult, because we attach importance to the worldly objects. If we resolve that we have to perform all actions for the welfare of others without any desire, the path of action will become easy and quick. In fact, there is no importance as such of the object, rather it is of its use. That use is significant only when one does not attach much value to the object. No worldly object is personal, it belongs to the world. But it has been given to us, so that we may make a proper use of it. When we regard it as our own, it becomes difficult for us to use it for the welfare of others. In fact, it is neither an object nor an action which leads to bondage, but it is attachment to it which binds. The wise perform actions for the welfare of the world without any egoistic notion, because they hold that whatsoever possessions such as body, senses, mind, intellect, position etc., have been acquired from the world, and these belong to the world. So it is honest on our part to use the worldly materials in the service of humanity. There is nothing creditable in returning trust money to its owner. In doing so, we are simply relieved of our responsibility. A debt has been repaid. In like manner, by using our possessions in the service of the world, we merely repay the debt we owe to the world, since it is only from the world that we have received these possessions. A wise man without attachment, who has been described in the 25th verse by the expression asakta vidvan, has been called yukta vidvan here. An enlightened soul, who remains equanimous, is unmoved under all circumstances, whose senses are controlled, and to whom a clod, a stone and a piece of gold are same, is called yukta vidvan. Wise man established in the self, Gita 6/8. Ignorant men attached to prescribed action, who have been described in the 25th verse by the expression sakta avidvamsa, have been called by the expression karmasananam ajnanam here. These people have been called karmasani, attached to action, and ajnani, ignorant, because they perform action prescribed by the scriptures, for themselves, in order to gain pleasure, honor and praise etc. Great men have greater responsibility, because common men follow them. Therefore, the Lord urges the wise man that he should not perform any such action or make any such utterance as may lead the ignorant to a downfall, which has been called here as buddhibdam, unsettlement in the minds. Therefore, a wise man should perform virtuous actions, according to his caste and order of life, for the welfare of other people, so that they may be inspired to perform their duty, without any desire for fruit. This rule also applies to important persons of society and of family, that they should perform their duties scrupulously, and they may set an example for other members of society and family. Some of the examples of unsettling the minds of ignorant people are as follows. 1. Knowledge is superior to action. Actions bind a man. This type of preaching undermines faith in action. 2. Everybody performs actions with a selfish motive. Desire for fruit is natural. Why should a man perform action, if he has no desire for its fruit? Such thoughts unsettle the minds of ignorant people. 3. When a person performs actions, with the desire for their fruits, he has to take birth again and again, to reap the fruit of his actions. Thus common people cease to have faith in the fruit of action. Such statements unsettles the minds of ignorant people. Consequently, they renounce the performance of virtuous actions, even though they remain attached to their fruit. The fact is, that it is not action, but attachment, which leads to bondage. Thus an enlightened soul, instead of confusing the minds of ignorant people, should perform his obligatory duty, according to his caste and order of life, and also get it performed by others, so that they, instead of having a downfall, may rise to a higher level. He should admire their virtuous actions, and make them aware of the evil actions, so that they may renounce these. Moreover, he should explain to them that it is not proper to have a desire for the fruit of virtuous actions, such as sacrifice, charity and adoration etc., because this fruit is nominal. It is just like selling a precious jewel for the price of pebbles, and so it is not a wise act. But if they act without desire for fruit, it will lead them to bliss. Similarly, he should not confuse the minds of ignorant people about adoration and spiritual practice. Generally, people say that it is futile to chant the Lord's name without concentration. But an enlightened soul should preach that chanting of the Lord's name never goes in vain. But if the name is chanted with concentration, it expedites spiritual progress. Everyone possesses some virtue or the other. Therefore, when an enlightened soul wants to preach a sermon to a common man, he, instead of reproaching and insulting him, should praise his virtues and then should preach the sermon. Such a sermon makes a strong impression upon the common man. The chief of a family or the society should also do the same. The Lord, through the terms samakaran, duly performing, and josayat, should get them to perform, directs a wise man, to perform his duty, scrupulously according to the scriptural injunctions. 2. He should make the ignorant men, who are attached to action, perform their duty. Ostentation in the performance of actions is hypocrisy, which is a mark of demoniac nature. Gita 1614. Therefore, the Lord orders people to perform actions, not for show, but for the welfare of the people. An enlightened soul should set other people, who are attached to action, to act by performing their duty scrupulously, without attachment, and also by preaching a sermon. He should inspire them to discard selfishness, and also inspire them through his example and precepts, to perform prescribed actions and to refrain from forbidden actions. Appendix: enlightened exalted souls and God both are free from egoistic notion. Therefore they perform their duty for the welfare of others, not for themselves. A striver should do nothing for himself, because in the self there is no sense of doership. The act of deviating the people from the sinful, wrong, path and directing them towards the virtuous, right, path is welfare of others. The method of the welfare of others is to act according to the ordinance of the scriptures. But a striver from within should have the feeling that he has to do nothing for himself. But he should not divulge the fact among people that he does nothing for himself. Linked now, the Lord distinguishes the unwise from the wise, in the following verses. All actions are performed, in all cases, by the modes of nature, prakrital. He whose mind is beguiled by egoism thinks, I am the doer. 27. Comment: Ali, the functions of the world, such as birth and growth of bodies and plants, flow of the Ganges and changes in worldly things, etc., as well actions, such as seeing, hearing, eating and drinking, etc., are carried out by the modes of nature. But a man deluded by egoism divides all activities performed by cosmic energy into two parts. To the first part belong actions, which he thinks he does not perform but occur naturally, such as formation of the body and digestion of food, etc. The second part consists of those actions which he thinks he performs, such as seeing, speaking and eating, etc. A man out of delusion regards himself as the doer of the latter class of actions. Intellect, ego, mind, 5 subtle elements, 10 organs of perception and actions, and 5 objects of senses. These are also called the modes of nature, because they are the evolutes of the 3 modes of nature, goodness, passion and ignorance. The Lord declares that all actions are performed by the modes of nature, not by the self. Egoism is a state of mind, while he, the self, is the knower of that state. But by an error, he identifies the self with that state, and thus he is deluded by egoism. As a body denoted by the term itam is different from the self, so is egoism. Itam cannot be I. This is the rule. But when he regards egoism as self, he is known as a hankrava madhatma, one whose mind is deluded by egoism. This assumed egoism is not wiped out by efforts, as these involve the ego, but it is wiped out by non-acceptance, viz., non-assumption. An important fact: egoism is of 2 kinds: I, real as I am, relating to one's existence; 2, unreal, assumed, as I am body. Real egoism is natural and eternal, while unreal egoism is unnatural and perishable. Real egoism can be forgotten but cannot perish, while unreal egoism may appear, but cannot exist. A man commits an error, that he forgets real egoism, self, and assumes the unreal egoism, I am the body, to be true. Though all actions are performed by modes of nature, yet a person whose mind is deluded by egoism, real egoism in fact is not egoism. It is an aggregate of truth, knowledge, and bliss. It is called real, because it never changes, while the unreal egoism changes. Today a man is uneducated. Having received schooling he says he is educated. Thus the unreal egoism changes. But he, the self, remains the same. As soon as he ceases to identify himself with the unreal egoism, the real egoism, as the aggregate of truth, consciousness, and bliss, remains. Thinks that he is the doer, because he regards egoism as the self. It is because of this egoism that he identifies the self with the body, senses, mind, and thus regards the self as the doer. This egoism is self-made, and so it can be eliminated by the self. The method to throw it out is through non-assumption. This false assumption can be rooted out if he realizes that he, the self, is different from the body, senses and mind, etc. Performance of actions and non-performance of actions, all our activities, sleeping, waking, sitting, walking in trance, etc., are included in activities which take place in nature, while the self is free from performance and non-performance of actions. The self is the illuminator and knower of them. A man automatically remains established in the self, but the self assumes its affinity for actions. This assumed affinity is called egoism. An important fact: as a wave is a part of an ocean, so the ocean and the wave belong to the same class. Similarly, a body, a fragment of the world, and the world belong to the same class. The soul, self, is different from the world or the body. Man does not take the world to be his own self, but he does take, even though wrongly, his body to be so. Just as a wave without an ocean has no independent existence of its own, similarly, without the world, there cannot be any separate existence of the body. But, when a man, whose mind is deluded by egoism, identifies the self with the body, several desires are born in him, as he has desire for family, riches, praise and pleasures, etc. He does not realize that by identifying the self with the body, he is already a captive, and these desires will strengthen the bondage and will hurl him into the abyss of adversity. Even though a striver during his disciplining period may not feel that he is above and beyond the modes of prakriti, but when he accepts to be so with a strong faith, he starts feeling himself bound. Propagated. Thus, just as a person is bound due to his wrong assumptions, in the same way he is freed from his shackles through correct assumptions, because it is a principle that an assumed fact ceases to be by unassuming it. The same fact has been pointed out by the Lord, in the 8th verse of the 5th chapter, by the term manyata, should believe, when he declares, the man, who is united with the divine and knows the truth, thinks that he does nothing at all. By such thinking, a striver realizes the truth. When even the unreal assumptions such as I am the body, I am doer, become so steady, that it seems difficult to renounce these, why would the reality, I am not the body and I am not a doer, not become the steady? And once the reality is confirmed, how can it be abandoned? Appendix: all actions take place in the material realm. In the sentient realm there is no action at all. He whose mind is beguiled by egoism thinks I am the doer. The mind being beguiled by egoism means to assume the self's identity with ego, a fragment of apara, lower or insentient, prakriti, nature, viz., to assume ego as the self. I am this. This is known identification. He who regards himself as the doer is sentient, but he regards the insentient ego as the self. It means that he who regards ego as the self, who assumes himself unipresent, is in fact a fragment of God. In that self no sense of doership is possible. Gita 13:29. In fact the self can't be identified with the body. Izoristapai kantianakrati na lipiate. Gita 13:31. But he assumes his identification with the body kartahamitamaniyate. In fact there is no identification, it is merely an assumption. It means that the self does not become a doer, but there is only assumption of doership due to lack of discrimination maniyate. As soon as he thinks himself to be the doer, scriptural sanction prohibition applies to him and he has to become the enjoyer, experiencer, of the fruit of action. In the self there is no action. An action takes place where there is some empty space. How can an action take place in the solid self? But when a person assumes himself to be a doer, the action of propagated, with which he accepts his relationship, bears fruit for him, which he has to endure. The reason is that he, who is a doer, is an experiencer. The self has no relationship at all with any karaka, case. Therefore in the self there is not even an iota of doership. The realm of doership is different. By now the actions which have been performed in the species of gods, men, animals, birds, gnomes and devils etc., out of them no action could have an access to the self, nor the body could have an access to the self, because the division of action and object, body, is quite different from the division of the self. But without attaching importance to this discrimination, a man gets bound by action and its fruit. He who feels that something is to be done, has affinity with ego, because without the sense of doership no action is possible. The sense of doership crops up as one thinks of doing something. With the sense of doership, there is performance of action, and by performing an action, the sense of doership is strengthened. Therefore by practicing the spiritual discipline being an agent, the striver can't be free from egoism. An action done with the sense of egoism can never lead to salvation, because egoism is the root of all misfortunes, of birth and death. If actions are not performed for one's own self, affinity for egoism does not persist, viz., affinity for the entire nature, prakriti, is renounced. Therefore a striver, instead of attaching importance to the performance of action, should attach importance to discrimination. By attaching importance to discrimination, discrimination is naturally revealed clearly and it guides a seeker. Afterwards this discrimination is transformed into real knowledge. Having true knowledge of the respective spheres of modes, guna, and actions, the knowing soul does not get attached with them, by realizing that it is an interplay of the modes. 28. Comment here: the term to, but, has been used to distinguish the enlightened soul from the person whose mind is deluded by egoism, as described in the preceding verse. The three modes of goodness, of passion and of ignorance, are born of nature. The entire universe, including the body, senses, mind, intellect, creatures and objects etc., is constituted of the three modes. This is the sphere of the modes of nature. Actions performed with body etc., is a sphere of action. The modes, objects, and actions, are ever-changing and transitory. The matter has its origin and actions have a beginning and end. To know this fact properly is, having a true knowledge of modes and actions, along with their divisions. This is the truth about the modes of nature and their actions. The soul, self, never undergoes any action. It is ever unconnected and changeless, i.e., it has no connection with things and actions. This is the truth about the soul. The ignorant, when he assumes his relation with the two spheres of modes and actions, gets himself bound. Philosophically, the main reason of this bondage is ignorance, but from the standpoint of a striver, the main cause is attachment. Attachment is a lack of discrimination. It perishes when discrimination is aroused. This discrimination is particularly found in human beings. What is needed is simply to give it due importance and to arouse it. Therefore, a striver should wipe out attachment. The striver, who does not assume his affinity for modes, things, and actions, knows the reality of the modes of nature, and their actions. He may know the reality, either of the modes of nature and their action or the self. The result is the same, i.e., he knows the reality of the two. 1. How to know this truth? 1. Though the Supreme Self dwells in the body, yet it neither acts nor is tainted. Gita 13:31. Evolutes of nature, body, senses, mind, intellect etc., are called this. This cannot be When this, body etc., is not one, how can actions performed by this, body etc., be mine? It means that the body, senses, mind and intellect etc., are the evolutes of nature, while the self is totally unconnected with them. So how can the self be the doer of actions? He who realizes this fact, is not in bondage. When he realizes that he does nothing at all, Gita 5:8, it means that he realizes that he, the self, is different from actions. 2. All the movements, such as seeing, hearing, eating and drinking etc., are actions, while foodstuff and liquids etc., are objects. These actions and objects are known by the sense organs, eye, ear, tongue etc. The sense organs are known by the mind is known by the intellect, and the intellect is known by egoism-ness. This egoism is also illumined by the sentient light, which is the knower, the illuminator and base of all of them. How to know the self, sentient, which is beyond egoism? In sound sleep, Though intellect merges into ignorance, yet having awakened from the sleep, a man says that he slept soundly. It means that he existed even during the sound sleep. Otherwise, he would not have known, experienced, that he slept soundly. Thus, everyone in every state realizes I am. These are called enlightened souls who have renounced their affinity even for I, egoism, and have realized the self. We have a real affinity for changeless God, while our affinity for the changing nature is merely assumed. If we renounce our affinity for nature through discrimination, it is known as jnanaga, discipline of knowledge. If this affinity is renounced by performing duty for the welfare of others, it is known as karmaga, discipline of action. When we renounce our affinity for nature, we realize yoga, i.e., union with God. Otherwise, it is merely jnana, knowledge, and karma, action. Those who realize this real affinity for God, having renounced the affinity for nature, are tattvavat, enlightened souls. The body, senses, mind and intellect etc., are also called modes, as these are born of modes of nature, and all actions are performed by them. Out of ignorance, a man by assuming his affinity for these modes, becomes a doer of actions, i.e., by regarding the actions and objects as his own, and he becomes a doer. But, when he realizes that the self is different and is an illuminator, he cannot think that he is a doer. A train, having received power from the engine, runs with the help of a driver. The engine supplies power, but the train reaches its destination only when the driver drives it. The engine has no senses, mind and intellect. Therefore, it needs a driver, man, with senses, mind and intellect. But, a man has an engine in the form of body and has also senses, mind and intellect to drive it. But the senses, mind and intellect function having received inspiration from the source of light. First, light is reflected in the intellect, from the intellect it goes to the mind, from the mind it goes to the senses, and then the engine, body, functions. Intellect, mind, senses and the body, these are modes, and their illuminator is the self which is not connected with them. Therefore, the modes are acting on the modes. Mostly, the people follow examples set by great men. Therefore, the Lord declares that as a great man holds that it is the modes which are acting on the modes, and does not get attached to them, while he works for the welfare of the world. Similarly, a striver should also do the same. A vital fact pertaining to nature and spirit: there is always an attraction between senses and objects, if these belong to the same class. Ears have attraction for words, skin for touch, eyes for form, tongue for taste and nose for smell. Thus, all the five senses have attraction for their sense objects. Any sense cannot have an attraction for the object of another sense. For example, the eye cannot have attraction for melodious words. The self, in fact, has no attraction for nature, as it is not of the same character. It is changeless, eternal, pure and uniform, while nature is quite otherwise. But by identifying itself with a body, a fragment of nature, it has attraction for nature. The attraction of the embodied soul for the worldly objects is really attraction of nature in nature. The senses of doership and enjoyership are in nature, not in the pure self. Lord Krishna, in the 31st verse of the 13th chapter, declared of the self, though it dwells in the body, yet it neither acts nor is tainted. The soul is said to be the cause, in regard to the experience of pleasure and pain. Gita 13,120, when it, the soul, resides in nature. Gita 13,121, i.e., it identifies itself with body etc. It means that it is because of its identification with nature, body and senses etc., that it becomes happy or sad. Because prakriti, inert as it is incapable of experiencing pleasure and pain, and the self, conscious, alone cannot become enjoyer, without association with prakriti. The self is free from the kaleidoscopic qualities of prakriti, but it is certainly capable of assuming a relation with prakriti. It is not at all inert like a stone, on the contrary, it is knowledge incarnate. Had the soul not been competent to assume affinity, how could it establish relation with prakriti? How could it assume the activities of prakriti taking place in it, the soul? How could it assume doership or enjoyership in it? Assuming or not assuming relation is a feeling and not an action. The self, possesses competence to establish a relation or otherwise, but on its own it is incompetent to act. Only kaleidoscopic agents can have the capability of taking action. The self is by nature changeless, whereas prakriti changes every moment. In other words, activeness is innate in prakriti. Therefore, by establishing affinity with prakriti, the self supposes itself to be the doer. Gita 3:27. It is a merit, rather than a demerit, of the soul that it undergoes no change. It ever remains the same and is uniform. It cannot change, in the same way as ice cannot be hot. But it is free, and so it depends upon it, whether it accepts its affinity for nature or not, though really it has no affinity with nature. When the soul identifies itself with the body, it has attraction for nature, and then it performs actions and has to reap the fruit in the form of pleasure and pain. In fact, pleasure and pain have no separate existence. Therefore, the Lord urges men to renounce their assumed affinity for nature, by considering that it is the modes, which are acting on the modes, while the soul or self is quite detached from them. As a matter of fact, disassociation is already there, and association is wrongly assumed. Therefore, it is necessary to give up this assumed relation and to realize the fact that it is only modes that are reacting on modes. Iti Madhvanasajjate. Here, the term marva has been used for knowing. An enlightened soul distinguishes the soul from nature, and so he is not attached to the modes of nature. By using the term marva, the Lord seems to direct striver not to be attached to the modes of nature, by regarding these as different from the self. An important fact: the methods followed by a karmagi, man of action, and a jnanagi, man of knowledge, are different. The former tries to wipe out his assumed identity with the body, etc. In the Bhagavata, it is mentioned, persons with desires deserve to follow the path of action. 11,127. Lord Krishna in the Gita has also laid emphasis on the performance of duty, when he declares, "Not by non-performance of action does a man attain actionlessness." Gita 3/4. For a sage who wishes to attain to yoga, action is said to be the means. Gita 6/3. A karmagi performs action for others, not for himself. Therefore, he does not become an enjoyer. When he does not become an enjoyer, his sense of doership automatically perishes. He becomes doer only in order to reap the fruit of action. He does not remain a doer if he does not desire the fruit of action. Therefore, in fact, a karmagi also does not a doer. In Sankhya, discipline of knowledge, there is predominance of discrimination. Such a striver holds, it is the modes which are acting on the modes. By thinking so, he does not become a doer of actions. The same fact has been pointed out by the Lord, in the 29th verse of the 13th chapter, when he declares, "He who sees that all actions are performed by nature alone, and that the self is not the doer, he verily sees." When he does not remain a doer, there does not arise any question of his being an enjoyer. In this chapter, the Lord has laid great emphasis on the performance of action, as it was by action alone that Janaka and others attained perfection. 320. I engage myself in action. 322. A wise man also performs actions for the welfare of the world without attachment, as an ignorant man acts from attachment. 325-26. It proves that performance of actions is good in every way. Appendix: he who is not deluded by egoism is an enlightened soul. This enlightened soul has been mentioned Tattvadarsi, the seer of truth, in the 16th verse of the 2nd chapter. An enlightened soul transcends the spheres of mode, guna, objects, and actions totally. So long as a striver has affinity for the world, he can't be an enlightened soul. The reason is that a man can't know the world so long as he is attached to it. The world can be known only when he disconnects himself from the world. This is the rule. Similarly, a man cannot know God by assuming himself apart from God. He can know him only by identifying himself with him. This is the rule. The reason is that really we are different from the world and are identical with God. The body is identical with the world, while we, self, are identical with God. Those who are deluded by the modes of nature, will one faint attached to those modes and actions. Man of perfect knowledge should not unsettle the minds of the ignorant, who know only little. 29. Comment: the three modes, goodness, passion and ignorance, of nature, bind a man. The mode of goodness, sattva, binds by attachment to happiness and knowledge. The mode of passion, rajasa, by attachment to action, and the mode of ignorance, tamasa, by heedlessness, indolence and sleep. Gita 14:6-8. In this verse, is a description of those ignorant people, who are deluded by the modes of nature, i.e., who are bound by them, but who have faith. In the scriptures, in prescribed virtuous actions and in the fruit of those actions. These people have been called the ignorant people attached to action. In the 25th and 26th verses, they are attached to actions and objects, in order to enjoy worldly and heavenly pleasures. Therefore they cannot understand the advice as to how to rise above them. So the Lord has called them ignorant. Ignorant people perform virtuous actions with the expectation of perishable fruits. They remain attached to the acquired materials, such as wealth, etc., and have a desire to acquire the unacquired ones also. It is because of their attachment and desire that they do not know reality about modes, objects, and actions. Ignorant people know what prescribed actions are, and how these should be performed well, but they do not know the reality about modes and actions. So, it has been said that they know only little, i.e., they are men of imperfect knowledge, and they have been called ignorant, because they are interested in enjoying worldly pleasures and prosperity. A man of perfect knowledge, who knows the reality about the sphere of the modes and actions, should not confuse the minds of the ignorant ones, otherwise they would renounce virtuous actions and would have a downfall. Such a wise man has been called unattached wise man, in the 25th verse, and balanced, established in the self, wise man, in the 26th verse of this chapter. The Lord, in the 25th verse, directed a wise man to act by using the term kuryat, while in the 26th verse he ordered him to engage the ignorant men in action, by the term josayat. But the Lord, by the expression naviklat, instead of ordering him, makes a bit of relaxation, by declaring that he should not at least unsettle the minds of the ignorant, with his hints or words or actions. The reason is, that the Lord does not enforce strict discipline on the liberated souls, nor do the scriptures. Actions are automatically performed, by their, so-called, bodies for the welfare of the world. An enlightened soul, whether he is a karmagi or jnanagi, has not the least attachment, either to actions or objects, because he knows the truth that there is no real affinity between him and actions or objects. The ignorant perform virtuous actions in order to gain the heaven. Therefore, the Lord has ordered the wise men not to unsettle the minds of the ignorant people with their hints, words or actions, otherwise they would lose their faith and interest in virtuous actions, and would give these up, which would lead them to a downfall. Therefore, such people should be dissuaded from a desire for fruit, rather than from actions prescribed by the scriptures. It is not only proper, but also indispensable, to dissuade them from desire for the fruit of action, in order to release them from the bondage of a cycle of birth and death. Appendix A. Jana's question was why the Lord urged him to perform such a dreadful deed. The Lord answers his question in several ways, by which he means to declare, "My aim is not to engage you in a terrible deed, but I want you to renounce your affinity for actions." Karmaga aims at renouncing affinity for actions. Link. The Lord, in the next verse, explains what a striver should do to be free from attachment to action and its fruit. There is difference between kriya and karma. When the person has surrendering all actions to me, with the mind firmly fixed on the highest and free from desire and the feeling of mayum, and disconcertedly doing your duty of waging the war. 30. Comment. Generally a striver believes that he has to perform obligatory actions, but these lead him to bondage. In order to clarify his misconception, the Lord urges him to surrender all actions to him, with discriminative insight, without having the least affinity for these. In fact, all actions of the world are performed by Lord's power. The body, senses, mind, objects and power, etc., are the Lord's, and the Lord is his. By thinking so, when a striver performs actions, those actions, instead of leading him to bondage, steer him to salvation. Every person knows that he cannot keep the body, senses, mind, intellect and material objects, etc., under his control, according to his desire. These belong to nature, while the self is a fragment of the Lord. Gita 1517. So, real surrender consists in accepting these as of the Lord's, rather than his own. Therefore, surrender means the renunciation of assumed affinity for objects and actions, by attaching importance to discrimination. By the expression Adhyatmasitasa, the Lord means to say, that one should have a spiritual aim, of God, rather than a mundane one. The man who has fixed his aim, has a discriminative insight. In fact, a man's aim or necessity is, to attain the imperishable, spiritual, while his desire is to gain the perishable. A striver should decide upon the aim of his life, instead of having a desire. From either the philosophical or the scientific point of view, the egoistic notion that he is the doer, his kriya becomes a karma which bears threefold fruit: pleasant, unpleasant and mixed. Gita 18:12. But when he has no notion of doership, his kriya does not come into karma, i.e., does not bear fruit. It is profana, just like an impulse, nature. Gita 3:33.